Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the two things that it takes to be truly successful or highly successful in a repair shop. My name, of course, Kelly Bennett. Some of you know me, some of you don't. Just a brief introduction. I started my business in Calgary, where I am right now, in 1987. I started with a workshop called Starting a Successful Business, and I traveled across Canada, eventually to 153 cities, and yes, including Laval, where I was translated into French. And I taught literally from the west coast to the east coast, from Vancouver Island to Newfoundland. And I started the workshop Starting a Successful Business, but I'd also written a session on marketing and a session on business plan writing and government grants, etc. And I did a session in Kelowna, and somebody from a university saw me and wanted me to do some training. And they called me and said, can you do some training for the automotive industry? And I'm going to date myself a little bit further here, but I was a service advisor in Calgary in 1978, 79, and 80. It was a Texaco gas station. So for the people in Canada, I'm definitely dating myself there. We don't even have Texaco anymore. And gas, I recall, was 16.7 cents a liter. So gas was a whole lot cheaper, and running a shop was a lot easier. Running a shop was cheaper. We didn't have computers. We didn't have software. Our telephone systems were really inexpensive. We didn't have internet. We wrote everything by hand. We didn't have a lot of equipment, and it was pretty inexpensive to run a shop. Now, today, it's a lot more expensive. And of course, a big difference in those days is we worked on a lot of older stuff. Well, in the day it was new, but we worked on Pacers and Gremlins and Pintos, and once in a while we still saw a Rambler or, excuse me, some of the older Valiants. Remember the Valiant? You could open the hood, crawl inside, and work and still have room to work with the hood closed. And diagnostics was not something that was important. We spent the bulk of our day installing parts. And today, of course, it's much more complicated. So I did go do some training for the University College of the Fraser Valley, and since then, that was in 1990, that's all I do now is automotive training. My career has taken me all across Canada and literally to all 50 US states, and now I'm doing a lot more work online. It's easier for travel, and it reduces the expense of doing training, and it's a lot easier for people like you that don't have to head off to a training session and pay for hotel and airfare or whatever it might be. I want to tell you a story to start. I like to start with big picture, and I want to take a look at three different shop owners. One's name is Dustin, one is Kendra, and one is Scott, and they're all actually operating in the same city. And so being this my 30th year training, I've seen a lot. I've trained tens of thousands of people. I've worked with, many thousands of shops on one-on-one coaching and doing what we call on-site evaluations, where I go into a shop and spend the entire day and fill in a 54-page report card. And so I've seen a lot, heard a lot, learned a lot. And one of the things that amazes me is the difference that shops can do, not just in gross dollars, well, that's huge in and of itself, but in the whole area of gross profit and, of course, net profit as well. And I just want to take a look at, I'm just going to turn that off. Sorry, you turned your camera on there. And the three shop owners that I'm looking at are all in the same city. And I say that because even on this call, we have people in different cities across the country, and the webinar is being recorded, and people will be watching this from other cities. Most of the training I've done actually has been in the US, although in Canada, I did write for the Canadian Technician magazine for 8 years, so a lot of people in Canada know me from that. But it amazed me whenever I go to a city, and I oftentimes hear, I wouldn't say every city that I've been to, but almost every city, where people say it's different in the city that we're in. I was doing some training in Calgary, which is where I'm from, years ago, and somebody said, well, Calgary's different. And I said, why is Calgary different? And they said, well, it's an oil town, and I don't see the difference there. And they also said that Calgary is surrounded by small towns. There was a small town, Cochrane, which was where I lived. Population maybe 5,700 in the day. It's about 15,000 now. And Airdrie, which is just a little bit north, and another town south called Olds, and another one to the west called Chestermere. And people would say, well, it's different because we're so close to a small town. And what big city is not surrounded by small towns? I was doing some training where I lived in the town of Cochrane, and I was told that it's different because it's a small town. And that one I've heard a lot, but it's different. It's a small town. It's a small town. It's a small town. And I really don't see the correlation of a small town compared to a big town in the way that you run your business. I find actually in some small towns things tend to be more expensive because you're dealing usually with smaller businesses. And yeah, you can get groceries cheaper or maybe gas cheaper or whatever if you drive into the city, but you need to make a decision if your time is more important or your money. And so another time I was teaching in a city called Red Deer, Alberta, which is a medium-sized city in between a large city, Edmonton, which is still at least 50 miles or 80 kilometers north of there, and Calgary is about the same distance south of there. And somebody said, well, it's different in Red Deer because it's a medium-sized city, and this kind of stuff we're talking about probably works in a small town, or maybe it works in a big city, but it doesn't work in a medium-sized city. And I asked them if they were Malcolm in the Middle's auto repair, like you think because you're in the middle that you're not you're immune to this, or you're different than a big city or a small town. I was on Nanaimo, sorry, Vancouver Island one time in Nanaimo, a city. And a fellow had asked me, have you ever been to Nanaimo before? And I said, yes, I have. And then he said, well, you know, things are different in Nanaimo. And I said, well, what's different about Nanaimo? And he said, well, we have price-conscious people here. I said, oh, that's where they all went. Everybody said the price-conscious people seem to have dried up and moved away from their city, and we wondered where the price-conscious people went. Every city in North America, Canada, and the U.S. has people that are price conscious. They're cheap. They want used parts. They want big, good deals. They phoned around. They want to know your labor rate. They've already gone online and see what the time is. There's a fellow, one of my good friends, GEMINAR user in Ontario, where just a few weeks ago, he received an email from somebody that said they wanted some work done, and he'd already gone online and see that it should be about a 2-hour job. He had already ordered the parts online on eBay and was wanting to know what Rob was going to charge to have them installed. So that's a cheapskate. That's a person who wants everything except they don't spend money on it. And by the way, JD Power and Associates did a survey of our industry to find out what percentage of people were cheapskates. And they defined cheap, I'm trying to remember if it was they were willing to drive 5 kilometers to save $10 or 10 kilometers to save $5, something like that. But 12% of people said they would do that. They say that about 12% of our customers are cheapskates. It's all about the money. They don't care about anything else. But most people don't deal with you because of what your labor rate is. They deal with you because they know you, they like you, and they trust you. And they will drive past 1 shop, 3 shops, 5 shops, 10 shops to get to yours. And they come back, and they come back, and they come back. And most of them don't even know what your labor rate is. They just trust you. They trust you with their car. They like your reputation. They like you. And they come back, and they come back. And that's what it's about. It's about a relationship. And I want to encourage you not to try to please the 12 percenters, because I've seen too many businesses trying to please those 12 percenters, and I want everybody to be happy, everybody to be happy. I mean, how low would your labor rate need to be to make everybody happy? If your labor rate was only $50 an hour, there would still be some 12 percenters out there that think you're too expensive, because $50, you make $50 an hour, I only make $17.50 an hour. If your labor rate was 40, some 12 percenters would still think you're too expensive. If you bought your parts and sold them for what you paid for them and didn't make a dime on them, you would still have some 12 percenters that are saying, but your parts are too expensive, and I was online and I saw it cheaper someplace else. And I just see, because I switched to my other computer, I need to plug in my laptop. But I do want to take a look at 3 different shop owners. One's Dustin, one's Kendra, and one is Scott. And before we get into that, I would like you, for those of you that are on here live, if I could get you please to indicate if you have a higher diagnostic labor rate, what that rate is. I believe, Vito, you do have a higher diagnostic rate. When anybody has a higher diagnostic rate, I've wondered where they take in training, because usually it's in training that you learn that your diagnostic labor rate cannot be the same. So if I could get you just down in the chat there to just type in if your labor rate is the same. Lisa, yes, your labor rate is higher. It's 114. Other people, please. And if you could just be patient, I need to, like again, I said I had to switch computer. And now we have power to last. I appreciate somebody said it's more expensive, but we never charge it. We don't have the time to get into a huge amount of discussion on some of these subjects. You know, for what I teach, I've got days and days and days of training. I could teach 5 days, and I have done 5-day sessions, and we don't repeat things. So we can only cover what we can cover in this short period of time. But selling diagnostics is really interesting because you are using your most expensive equipment. You're using your most expensive people. When I was in Laval last week, I asked people if you pay some people that are your technicians higher than others, and we had some people that paid $5 an hour more, or $10 an hour more, or $8 an hour more. And I say, is your diagnostic rate higher for these people? And the answer was no. I find it interesting that we're willing to pay somebody more because of their skill, because of their ability, because of their experience. Their license, they've got 8,000 or 9,000 hours of book time and repair time as a technician. They certainly know what they're doing. They've got $30,000, $40,000 in tools, hand tools of their own. Sometimes the box that the tools go into is $10,000. And we pay these people more, but we can't seem to justify charging our customers more for them. And so your diagnostic labor rate needs to be a whole lot higher. It needs to be about 150%. So if your labor rate's about 100, then your diagnostic rate needs to be somewhere around $150. And we won't get into detail on that because I do teach that subject. It's actually a webinar. That's a 2-hour webinar just on selling diagnostic labor. And we've got an hour to look at some of the big picture stuff. The name of this workshop is called The 2 Things It Takes. And from my experience, the 2 things that it really takes to be, like we're going to see Scott here, who's a real person. Scott does extremely well. I've known Scott since the early 90s. He was in a management group that I ran at that time. Then I went to work in the US. He still is in a management group. And Scott does extremely well. And he is on his game. He knows his numbers. And he also is in a management group. And just a quick story, I was asked by Workers' Compensation in British Columbia to train a technician who had been injured. And he was a technician. It's going to take some water here. And it is water, it's not vodka. And he'd been injured, and he couldn't be a technician anymore. He'd done it for 25 years. And they asked me if I could retrain him to be a manager. And that's what I did. I've done that a few times. And so we did some one-on-one training where he was the only student in my class. We sat across from each other, and I trained him for 3 days. I gave him access to all 12 of my online webinars. He must have been getting tired of my voice. And we also went out to some shops, and we spent 2 days at shops taking a look at how to do the things in a practical sense. So it was 5 days of training that we did in addition to the webinars. And the first shop that we went to was set up by a client of mine, and I had no idea what I was in for until I got there. I'd not been to that shop before. I was really disappointed. Their labor rate was low. Their parts gross profit was 38%. Some of it was 32%. Their tire gross profit was 18%. That's horrific. It should be 30%. And they were only selling about 4 hours a day out of the 8 that each technician was available. The dollars weren't there. The gross profit wasn't there. They were busy. They were busy. They weren't dead. They had lots of cars, but they just weren't making money. They were spinning the wheels. And we spent about a half day at that particular shop. We'd arranged that. And then I called some other shops in the area that I'd known from the early 90s. And Scott was one of them. And it's not the same Scott I'm looking at here, but Scott, we went to his shop, and I don't exaggerate these points, and I'll show it to you. I'll prove it to you. Scott had his best month ever last July, so a year ago, in 2016. And he did $53,000 a month in that month per technician, per tech. I see some people that do $53,000 with 3 technicians or 2 technicians. And I was at his shop, which is a beautiful, beautiful facility, and he's a manager. He runs the business. He's not a technician. He's not on the counter. His office is upstairs, not right by the, if you're down too close to the counter in your office, you're going to get distracted way too many times. And while we're saying that, the average manager is interrupted 232 times a day. So Scott was doing really good numbers, and I brought this fellow that I mentioned. He was being trained, the workers' compensation guy, and we're sitting in the boardroom because he did have a boardroom in his shop, and I looked and there was a whiteboard there, and on the whiteboard it was written down productivity, proficiency, efficiency. We went to another shop. This is another fellow that I've known for years, beautiful big facility. He works on a lot of RVs, very busy shop. They're actually open one extended evening a week because they've got so much business, and they're also open on a Saturday. And I'm usually opposed to that, but they do have some people who are interested in working those hours who are not regular staff. I have a problem with Saturday when somebody is off on, let's say, a Monday to work Saturday, or somebody is off on a Tuesday so they can work Saturday, and I don't like that because the inventory is the same. If I'm working for you and I'm there for 40 hours, and I'm there Monday through Friday, it's 40 hours. And if I'm off one day during the week to be there on the Saturday, it's still 40 hours. And so you're not getting any extra inventory from your technicians. The other thing is some people pay overtime to have that person there on the Saturday or the evening, and that doesn't work. The gross profit sacrifice is too great. But in this particular case, they are open really late. And anyway, they do about $48,000 a month consistently per technician. And we're sitting in the office, beautiful office, him and his wife have to share this beautiful office. And on the wall, there was a board, and it said productivity, proficiency, efficiency. We went to another shop, another fellow who I'd known for many, many years. And again, I don't want to repeat this too much, but amazing numbers, great gross profit, great sales per month per technician. And again, on his whiteboard, it was productivity, efficiency, proficiency. The first shop that I was at that I just mentioned with him, their sales weren't good, their hours sold were bad, their gross profit was bad. But if you asked them what their productivity was, they wouldn't know. They didn't know efficiency. They didn't know proficiency. They didn't know. We had to track and see how many sold hours that they were selling. And bottom line is, I learned many times, but in that particular instance that week, training the guy on workers' compensation, that the two things that it takes to be successful running a shop is, number one, being on your numbers. I had a fellow on a webinar, exact same topic as this, just a little while ago. I'll just say his shop's in Canada. That's enough to say. And he sent me an email the next day and said, Kelly, I've been doing this for 30 years. And he said, I still don't understand the numbers. He said, I think sales last month, or last year, I should say, were 1.1 million, not totally sure. And he said, I think we broke even. So he wasn't totally sure about the sales. Now he's trying to guess that from looking at his income statement, obviously, but he didn't remember if he'd made a little bit or lost a little bit. And I did the math, and his shop should be doing $3 million a year. And for those of you that were at the session I did last week in Laval, I used this exact same spreadsheet we're looking at, and I was learning it myself. I was putting in the numbers. I didn't know what you were going to see when I was seeing it, because I didn't know when we changed the number of technicians, but you were there. If you were there in that session, and you saw that he could do the same amount of money that he was doing with 2 technicians instead of the 5 that he had. So let's take a look at these 3 shop owners. There's Dustin, there's Kendra, and there's Scott. And I'd like to say on the start here that they all are in the same city. So we can't say, well, it's the weather in one city, or it's cold and, it's good for batteries, alternators, and starters if it's up in Alaska or something, or Canada, or it's way down south and they're good for the AC business. I've had people say, well, it just didn't get cold enough this year, it didn't get hot enough this year. And my response is, if you're looking for the weather to change to be busy as a repair shop, you're a farmer, not a repair shop. We're not at the whims of the weather, because that means that we're waiting for people's alternators to be replaced. We're a fix-it-as-it-breaks shop. We're not a maintenance shop taking care of things before they're a problem. We're taking care of them after they become a problem. Dustin's labor rate, just for the record, is $100 an hour. Kendra's labor rate is $100 an hour, and Scott's labor rate is $100 an hour. And each of them has the exact number of technicians. Dustin has 3, Kendra has 3, and Scott has 3. The difference is the dollars. And then, of course, there's a reason why the dollars are so different. But let's just take a look at Dustin. Dustin has 3 technicians. They are there 8 hours a day. Usually there's 21 working days in a month, sometimes 23, sometimes 22, but the average is 168. And so with 3 technicians, they are there about 504 hours. Now, this is, in a month. It changes throughout the year, of course, when you do the calculations for a year, because you've got vacation time, you've got time off for holidays, statutory holidays that we have here in Canada. And of course, there's sick times and those kinds of things as well. So you can do it for a year based on whatever it is your numbers are, and you can customize this for your shop. I'm just going to do it across the board at 504 hours for each of these shops. And as I mentioned, the labor rate at Dustin Shop is 100. They like to be similar. Kendra Shop is 100. But before we do that, actually, I'm going to show this a little bit differently than I normally do. And so at Dustin Shop, they're about 60% productive, which means their technicians spend about 60% of the day working on stuff that makes money. So the comeback, not making money, company vehicles, not making money, waiting for parts, not making money. In reality, there's only 2 kinds of time in your day. There's making money time, there's losing money time, and that's all there is. And most shops, unfortunately, most independent repair shops don't track it. So at the end of the day, at the end of the week, the end of the month, they don't really know what their productivity was. They don't really know what their efficiency was or their proficiency was. And I really appreciate Vito being on this call. Vito, you were in my class last week, and you know it's a productivity problem. At least you know that. Some people think, well, maybe I need more cars. Actually, some shops are too busy to make money. They got cars all over the place. They're just not making money. Some people think it's the labor rate. Some people think it's the parts gross profit. Maybe it is. But more often than not, it's really simple. We don't spend enough time working on cars, and we're not fast enough at it. And I know that sounds simple, and it is simple, but it's not easy, because there's all of the interruptions that happen in a day. I use this quote that running a business is actually quite simple. All you need to do is to buy some parts and install them for more than what you paid for them. That's all there is to it, really, except for a few thousand details. And it's those few thousand details that get us bogged down. I was at a shop just recently in BC. They were so busy, I almost couldn't stay. My head was spinning. I was watching what they were doing, and I don't exaggerate. They were looking for a customer's keys. I was at the counter. I was doing my on-site evaluation, and they said, okay, we're going to look for your keys. We're going to find your keys. We're going to find your keys. And they're trying to find your keys. And they had this box of keys that was just full of keys. It was overfull of keys. And I was embarrassed for them because they couldn't find the customer's keys. And that happens all the time. And so somebody had to go and see if maybe one of the technicians had the keys. And the technician came up to the front and said, no, I don't have the keys. And I said, sometimes it's best just to say to the customer, which keys are yours, because they recognize their keys a lot faster than us. And of course, if I was the customer, I'd say, yeah, those BMW keys are mine, or maybe the Jaguar keys are mine. Anyway, it took over 5 minutes for the lady's keys to be found, and they told me that happens every day when they move cars. And I don't exaggerate, they had 3 and 4 cars and trucks deep. The bays were full, and outside the bay doors, they had cars just, in a line to come in, but they couldn't come in because they didn't have keys for the cars that were in there, and you know the story. And that's the way Dustin's shop runs. He's too busy to make money, and they're just not selling the time. That shop that I just mentioned to you in British Columbia, in February, I did their composite. I'm going to show you that at the end of this call. And they could have done as much money in February with half as many technicians. They have 4. They could have done the same dollars with 2. Now, that's not every month. The last month that I looked at, they did 60% of their sales, but still 40% of the money was missing. And I was bugging the owner. I said, I have a great session called 65 Ways to Increase Car Count. And I said, but I'm going to put together a session for you called 65 Ways to Reduce Car Count. Getting more cars is not often the solution. Sometimes it is. But I find that a lot of shops don't have a car count problem. They have a problem making every car count. So back to Dustin's shop. His technicians are there 8 hours a day, 21 working days in a month, and there's 3 technicians. So they have about 504 hours. Their productivity is 60%. Efficiency, which is not bad. Their technicians spend 100% of the time on the job, which is very common. Book calls for 2 hours, takes them 2 hours. Book calls for 3 hours, takes them 3 hours. Book calls for 1.2, takes them 1.2. Now, that's if the time is sold correctly. Time estimating guides, there's some inaccuracies for sure, but time estimating guides are based on routine tasks. Get it in, get it out. We're talking about fairly new vehicles without a huge amount of mileage, without, being 8 and 9 and 10 years old, without a tremendous amount of rust and broken bolts and abuse and damage. And some of them have been in an accident. Some of them, the brother-in-law worked on the car and messed things up. And most of the vehicles that we work on are not cut and dry jobs. And I guess that's a good question for you and a question for your staff, is to have a meeting and say, what percentage of the vehicles that come in here do you think are cut and dry jobs? Low mileage, newer vehicles, no rust, no dust, no broken bolts, none of that kind of stuff. And it depends on where you are. Like in Ontario in the winter, you have a tremendous rust problem. We don't have as much of that here, but there's other problems that happen in a vehicle. Again, huge mileage changes things. Our van that I wrote about in Canadian Technician got to 500,000 kilometers. That's pretty neat to get 500,000 kilometers from a vehicle made in North America. It's a Chevrolet and excuse me, Chrysler. And 500,000 kilometers, things are not the same. They don't operate the same. They don't function the same when you've got that many miles on a vehicle. And so you need to make adjustments for non-routine tasks. So if you make adjustments for non-routine tasks and you say, well, this is an hour's job, but the car has 300,000 miles or 500,000 kilometers, or the vehicle's been in an accident, or there's a tremendous amount of rust, or it's been abused, so we're going to have to sell that at 1.2, 1.3, whatever. The technician should be doing an inspection on the vehicle. One thing that's really key here is that every single work order or repair order, whatever you want to call it, given to a technician should have the time that is being sold for every single labor operation. If I'm a tech and you give me a job to do and you've sold an hour, but I don't know that, I just know that you're asking me to do this job and it takes me an hour and a half, you can't tell me I took too long. Now, if it took me 3 hours to do an oil change, I mean, that's an exception, but if it's a regular repair or diagnostics, if you didn't tell me the customer's paying for an hour and it took me an hour and a half because of rust or dust or broken bolts, or it was more complicated or whatever, that's not my fault. Now, if you put on the work order, it's a 1 hour job, it's once sold at 1 hour, and I spend an hour and a half, well, then you can talk to me and say you knew you had an hour. And if the sold time is on every single work order for every single labor operation, and the technician gets the work order and they see that it's a 1 hour job and they start to work on the car and go, this is not going to happen in an hour because of rust, dust, broken bolts, etc., then they can stop, go to the advisor, and have them call the customer and say, as you know, there's a tremendous amount of rust in the vehicle. As you know, there's 500,000 kilometers. As you know, the vehicle's been in an accident, and it is going to take longer. And I'm going to encourage you to always talk to your customer in dollars. Never talk to your customer in time. The only time that's important to a customer is what time can I pick up my vehicle. Most people, when they walk into your shop, have three things on their brain. What's wrong with my car? How much is this going to cost? And when is it going to be ready? With a heavy emphasis on when's it going to be ready, because I need it, because I've got 3 kids and 8 sporting events a week. Most people don't know or care if you are physically going to spend 1 hour on the job or 1.5 hours on the job. What they want to know is how much it's going to cost. So when you call the customer, or the advisor calls the customer and said, as you know, there's a tremendous amount of rust in the vehicle. We estimated $150. However, it is going to cost $180 or $220 or whatever the estimated time is going to be, and get authorization before the job is done. And I've done it. I know how it works. We sell jobs. We upsell them after it's done, after it's been approved by the customer. We estimated an hour and a half. It took 2.5. It was justified. The technician explained this bolt broke or whatever. So we call the customer and say, this is going to take longer because broken bolts are, I'm going to suggest you don't say broken bolts, by the way, because they're going to say, well, it wasn't broken when I brought it in. And you could just talk about the rust or whatever. or the possibility up front if bolts are going to break because of rust, but before it breaks, and it's going to cost more money. And they go, great, go ahead and do it. When will it be ready? And you say, it's ready now, come and pick it up. No, we don't do that. We say it's going to be another half hour, another hour, whatever it might be. Anyway, make adjustments for non-routine tasks. And lastly, I just want to say again, make sure that the sold times are there for every single labor operation. At Dustin's shop, that means they produce 302 hours. That's terrible. If you had 3 techs, 8 hours a day, 21 days a month, and they were there in your shop for 504 hours, excluding lunch, because this doesn't include lunchtime. It does include coffee breaks, etc., but it doesn't include lunch. You would want to sell 504 hours, but we only sold 302. Some shops don't even sell the 302. The shop that I mentioned to you that was in Canada that was doing 1.1 to 1.2 million, that should be doing 3 million, was actually, when I did this chart, below the average shop, below where we see where Dustin is. And by the way, after the session, I'm going to be sending you a link to this recorded session so you can listen to it again or share it with as many people as you want. I'm also going to send you a link so you can learn how to download it to your hard drive so you don't have to watch it online. You can actually download most things from YouTube, for example, on your hard drive with the exact same process I'm going to show you. And I'm sending you this spreadsheet so you can calculate this for your own shop. At a labor rate of $100 an hour, the Dustin shop can do $302,240. His parts purchase potential to go along with that should be about, 28,000. His extras, and just so you know what that means, we're talking about $28,000 just for parts, but when we add to that everything, which is the parts, the sublet, the tires, the towing, the shop supplies, and the environmental fees, sorry about my voice. So to be clear, that $28,000 is not in addition to this 30. What we're saying is the parts themselves should have been $28,000. But when you add everything, the parts, the sublet, the tires, the towing, the shop supplies, and the environmental fees, the shop should be able to do about $30,000 a month with the 3 technicians for a total of $60,000. Now we take a look at Kendra's shop. Still there, 504 hours, again, 3 techs, 8 hours a day, 21 days a month, but they're more productive. They spend more time working on income-producing work. Their efficiency is better. They're faster. The technicians maybe are more motivated, more trained, better trained, I should say. Maybe they've got more equipment. We could be selling more maintenance, better scheduling, pre-ordering parts. There's a lot of reasons why Kendra's shop runs smoother than Dustin's. She knows what she's doing. The hours produced are 423. Now, she's still not selling the 504 hours that are available to her, but she's doing a whole lot better than Dustin at the 302. To give you a clearer picture of what we're looking at here is, let's say in the morning at your shop, 8 spark plugs are dropped off, and you count them in the morning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That day, you know 4 were installed in a customer's vehicle, and at the end of the day, the other 4 are missing. The next day, 8 o'clock in the morning, 8 tires are dropped off at your shop. You count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That day, you know 4 were installed in a customer's vehicle. And at the end of the day, the other 4 were missing. You'd wonder where they went. Like, where did they go? How long would it take the average owner to freak out if 4 plugs were missing on day 1 and 4 tires were missing on day 2? Well, what if it's not parts? What if it's not spark plugs? What if it's not tires? What if it's hours? What if 8 hours showed up at your shop at 8 o'clock in the morning, your technician, and they were there for 8 hours and we sold 4? Or we sold 5. What happened to the other 3? We sold 6. What happened to the other 2? And the sad thing for me, that shop that I just mentioned that was a zoo, I told them you should be playing circus music because you're running a circus here. This is insane. I told him, I said, you're stressing me out. There's cars everywhere. I go to talk to the advisor. He's not there. The advisor was also a technician. The owner was, I called him Pinball Wizard. He was just here, there. He wasn't focused. He was all over the place because he had to be. He was putting out fires and doing this and doing that. And I said, you're wearing me out. I mean, I can't even follow you around. Like, it should run much smoother than this. And by the way, before I left the shop, I installed... sorry about this message popping up. I'm not sure why that does that, but that's one of my coaching clients who, by the way, just had his best month ever last month, and I'm looking forward to our next coaching session. He's done extremely well. I'm very, very proud of what he just did this past month. Anyway, I just lost my train of thought there for a second, but the shops do better than others because they're more organized and more efficient and all those kinds of things. And again, when you buy the hours, you want to sell the hours. Well, Kendra's doing better at selling the hours. The labor rate is the exact same. And her potential, and I need to see what I actually did wrong here. Why is that only $100 an hour? Oh, I should put $1 an hour. Ooh, that's not good. There we go, $100 an hour. So her shop can do $42,336 a month in labor only with the same number of technicians. The part sales to go along with that would be $40,000. What we're looking at here is productivity being better. We spend more time working on income producing work, and the efficiency's better. They're faster at it. And I know, as being a trainer who's trained tens of thousands of people, I've been in live classrooms, people look at me, and many, many, many times I've heard, but you make it sound simple. I said, it is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. Spend more time working on cars, be faster at it. Yeah, but it's easier said than done, which, if you think about it, easier said than done is one of the most irritating expressions we ever use, because every single thing in the world is easier said than done. It's easier for me to say I'm going to go to the grocery store than go to the grocery store. It's easy for me to say I'm going to write this estimate than to actually write the estimate. Everything's easier said than done. So let's put that aside. I know what they mean. But again, we're looking at shops that do absolutely amazing numbers. The parts go along with that go up, because if your technician is more productive, spends more time working on cars, and faster at it, we are definitely going to sell more parts, because that job got in, that car got out, in and out faster. So the parts to go along with that are going to increase. So should the shop supplies and the environmental fees. Maybe not always more sublet and tires and towing, but sometimes. But we sell a lot more stuff when the labor is taken care of. That shop's doing $84,000. And then we've got Scott Shop, and Scott Shop is $100 an hour as well. Excuse me, same number of technicians, but Scott can do $56,000 a month. The parts purchase to go along with that could be $53,000, and all the extras to go along with that. And just one last time, parts, sublet, tires, towing, shop supplies, and environmental fees. Everything else that you sell that's related to the repair business. Now, if you rent cars, that's not part of this. If you sell gas, that's not part of this. If you rent out a portion of your bay, that's not part of this. All we're looking at is everything related to the repair process. In this shop, doing $113,400. So what we're looking at is a difference of $60,000 and $113,000, which is a huge amount of money in 1 month, a $52,000 difference. What's the difference? And I know this sounds simple as well, but you need to know your numbers. You need to be on your game. You need to know your gross profit. You need to know the hours that the techs are there, how much time they spent working on income producing work. The difference here really is being able to know what your productivity is and what your efficiency is. And just to let you know, I'm going to be sending you a workbook that's from a slightly different session, but where I go into detail and I list what you need to do to increase your productivity, what things you can do better that allow you to waste less time and spend more time working on stuff that makes money, and ways of being more efficient. How do we get our technicians to be faster? And so again, that session in and of itself is a 2 to 3 hour session just on productivity, efficiency, proficiency, and the things we can do to fix it. But I am going to send you a workbook, and you can look through there and see the ways to increase productivity and efficiency. Now, I did want to show something that I realized that I have not done in a session like this in a very long time, and I'm just closing the screen off for just a minute. I want to show you something called Profit Builder. And I am going to send this to you, but because it's not actually, it's not a spreadsheet, it's actually software. So it's an executable file, and if I send it to you by email, you won't be able to receive it. So you're going to get this file, and along with it, it'll be Google Drive. Some of you already have Google Drive, and it'll say that you've received a file from Kelly that I want to share with you. You have to request permission back from me. Sorry, but that is the way it works. I received a file today from a company that they had to authorize it. And so when I get that email and authorize it back, then you're going to be able to download what's called the Profit Builder. And excuse me, I'm well aware that the word technicians is spelled incorrectly, but this is a flash presentation, and I don't have the ability to go in. I worked on this with a company years ago. You're going to see the labor rate's a little bit dated, but the information remains the same. Just to let you know, all you need to do is click, and you're going to see what the we're looking at a let's call it a fictional shop, just to see how the math is done. So on the left-hand side, you're going to see maybe a case study, we'll call it. And on the right-hand side, you see how to do your specific numbers. So we've got 3 technicians, and they are available 8 hours in a day. They work 5 days in a week. They work 50 weeks in a year. That would be more Canadian, with 2 weeks paid vacation off. You may even want to change that to 48 in Canada, because we have, all the statutory holidays to go along with that. Unfortunately, in the US, there is no requirement for 2 weeks paid vacation. So a lot of people work. What I say about Americans is the American dream is to work hard to buy toys that you don't have time for. Americans work more days per year than anybody else in the entire world, including the Japanese. They, in this particular case, would have 6,000 inventory hours. That means that if you have 3 technicians, you have about 6,000 inventory hours of inventory to manage. Personally, I would rather manage 6,000 spark plugs. I'd rather manage 6,000 tires, because if I've got that in inventory and I don't sell them today, they're still on my shelf. But with your technicians, they come in at 8 o'clock in the morning, they're there for 8 hours, and if you only sold 3 or 5 or 7, you can't say, well, let's put that on the shelf and sell it tomorrow. At the end of the day, it's gone. It's like a vapor. One of my favorite trainers in the US calls it the labor factory, and he said you start with a block of ice on your counter every day. At the end of the day, it's melted, and the next day you have to put a new block on. That's what labor inventory does. It is an intangible. You can't feel it, smell it, or taste it. It is invisible, but every single day you buy time. You buy time, you mark it up, which becomes a labor rate, and you resell it. With a labor rate, again, this is a bit dated, $63 an hour, which means this shop could do $378,000 in sales. This is similar to what we just looked at, but what we're really looking at here would be 100% productivity and 100% efficiency. Then what you would do is take what your labor sales were in whatever period of time. You can do this for a week, a day, a month, a year, a quarter, one tech, all your techs, whichever way you want to do it. And again, I'm going to be sending you this software complimentary. This shop could have done $378,000, so their proficiency was 70%. Proficiency means what percentage of the inventory that was available did you sell? Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I should have gone up to the top right. So now I'm going to use Carol's shop. And Carol, can you just let me know how many technicians you have, please? I'm going to have to pull this down so I can see where that is. It's down here, I believe. And Carol, if you could just type in there how many technicians you have, I'd appreciate that. Again, I'm going to be sending you this, and I'm also going to be sending you the Power of Team and the algorithmic calculator. So Carol, like many shops, her technicians are there. She has 3 technicians, okay? And I appreciate the fact that your labor rate went up to 86. Available hours in a day, I'm assuming that's going to be 8. Now, if your technicians are there 8.5 hours, then fill that in. If they're late, then you can make some adjustments with that. Assuming 5 days in a week. And I'm going to go with 48 weeks in a year, because with 2 weeks paid vacation, if they're there longer, maybe you give them 3 weeks. And, you've got Christmas and Easter and, July 1st, Canada Day, and Labor Day, and all of those times, plus some sick days, etc. And I don't want to exaggerate anything, so let's go with 48. All you need to do is go down here and calculate. And and that tells us that your shop, you have 5,760 hours. So that's a little different than the case study on the left because we used 48 weeks. And the labor rate, I'm just going to round it up to $87. Tells us that the labor inventory and potential inventory is 501,120. Again, you can customize this for your own shop when I send it to you. Now, just so you know, down here, you can navigate to other pages. Now, I'm not going to show you every single one of the pages. You can play with it when you get this tool to let you know it can be a little bit addictive. But the next thing we're going to take a look at, and all you need to, so you can go to any one of these pages directly here, or you can simply go to the next page by clicking next. The sales potential tells us what the potential can be for all sales. We just looked at Carol's labor potential only. We need to factor in the parts, the sublip, the tires, the towing, the shop supplies, and the environmental fees. Labor mix simply is what percentage of the money that came in the door came from the sale of labor. This particular case study was 47%. Their annual sales potential then, 804,000. They actually did 630,000. So the additional opportunity would be $174,255. Now, Carol, because we already put your numbers in from the previous page, it already knows that, sorry, I went to the wrong page. You just have to make sure that you go to there. And I've got to go back here. I haven't used this tool in a while, as I mentioned. Okay, sorry about that. Labor mix, I'm just going to go, Carol, and say 50%. The average shop is about 50%. Half the money comes from labor. The other half comes from everything else that we sell. We hit calculate here, and it tells us that the sales at your shop with 3 technicians, without looking at productivity and efficiency, just looking at the potential, if we sold all the time, would be just a little over $1 million. I'm not going to ask you what your sales were last year, but again, you could do this by the day, the week, the month. When we go to the next slide, and because I didn't finish this on the left-hand side, it's asking me to do that, is to actually realize the potential. How do we actually do that? We take in the left-hand side the 6,000 hours in inventory. We divide it by the average sold hours per repair order. This shop is at 3, which is the exception. Most shops are at about 1.1 to 1.2. Average visits per year we show as 3. The number of vehicles, that's a scary number, 666. Average vehicles per household is about 2. So this shop would only need 333 customers. Now, we're not saying this is a perfect world. We're not saying that you're going to have 333 customers coming in with 2 vehicles each, 666 visits in a year, or vehicles, I should say, coming in 3 times a year and buying 3 hours per repair order. This is not a perfect world. One of those numbers is going to be way off, maybe 2. What is interesting here is that it only requires 333. Now, I don't know if you know how many cars are in your database, not just customers, but cars. The average shop is about 1,300 customers in their database. Now, some are old, some have moved, some have died, whatever, and we need to harness that, or just like a garden, we need to weed it. And we need to be in communication with our database, preferably by email. But most shops have more of a car count than they need. Now, I'm just going to go at your shop, Carol. The average shop's at 1.1 to 1.2 hours per work order. I'm going to say that you're probably operating at 1.5. Of course, being a GEMCAR user, you're probably higher than the average shop in your area. Visits per year, 3. That doesn't have to be a whole number. That could be 2.5 or whatever. That tells us that number of vehicles required is 1,280. There's approximately 2.0, we'll go 2.0 vehicles per household, so that would mean you'd need 640 customers. The only reason this is in this software is to let you know that I'm just going to switch this page, to let you know that most shops don't have a car count problem. They don't have a database problem. Now, if you're a brand new shop, you've only been in business for a year or 2, you started from scratch, it takes a long time to build the database, and it's expensive. But if you've been around a long time and you got a lot of customers in your database, it's typically not a car count problem. or a customer count problem, it's usually making every car count. I just want to take a look at what your technician time per minute value is, Carol. And again, it remembers what you put in from previous pages for everybody that does this. So the labor rate we said was $87 an hour. About half of the money that comes in the door comes from labor. The other half comes from everything else that we sell. That tells us that the hourly revenue would be $174 an hour of all the sales combined. 60 minutes in the hour says that your technician's time is worth $2.90 a minute. Now, an $87 an hour labor rate is probably lower than most people, not everybody, watching this or listening to this later on, probably closer to $100 an hour, but your technician's time is worth about $3 a minute. For some of you, $3.50, some of you, $4 a minute. The question is, if a technician's time is worth $4 every single minute, or in this case, let's round it up to $3 a minute. Carol, you've got 3 technicians. That's $9 a minute in potential. Every minute that goes by, $9, $9, $9, $9. So we could be making $9 a minute, or we can be losing it. When a technician's texting, we're not making $9 a minute. When a technician's on their phone, we're not making $9 a minute. When we are waiting for parts, waiting for work, waiting for authorization, moving cars, all of those things that happen that reduce productivity, that reduce efficiency, cost us, in this case, $3 a minute per tech. Maybe it's not all the techs waiting for parts, but $3 a minute per technician. If you're at the end of the day parking as many vehicles as you possibly can inside. We call it the rack 'em and stacking. You bring them in, you stack up as many as you possibly can because you want as many parked inside as you can. And that takes maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes per tech, or 2 technicians doing it, or the owner even more expensive doing it. And in the morning you can't start work right away because you got to get those cars unracked and unstacked, and you get the car out and down off the lift because that's not the one you're working on right now. Moving cars is very expensive. Our productivity goal is 90%. We don't expect your technicians to spend 100% of the time working on stuff that makes money. That doesn't make sense. It can't happen. We'd all have to have non-smoking technicians, and we'd have to install catheters so they couldn't go to the bathroom, okay? That's not going to happen. The highest your productivity could be is 100%. Vito, if I'm at your shop, and I was there for 8 hours today, excluding my lunchtime, and you say, Kelly, how much time did you spend working on cars today? And I say 9 hours. Well, that's impossible. I can't. I can only do 8 hours of work if I'm there for 8 hours. And I can't spend every single minute of every single day working on cars. There's bathroom breaks. There's all sorts of things. Got to go grab some water, whatever. Now, unfortunately, sometimes it's other things like texting or, looking for keys or those kinds of things that we have control over. But our goal is that your technicians spend 90% of the day working on income-producing work. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all of this. You can see there's the gross profit calculator. I do want to go to what we call the effective labor rate. And the effective labor rate is an extremely important calculation because what you say you charge in an hour and what you actually charge in an hour are 2 totally different things. If your labor rate is $87 an hour, Carol, not every hour it gets sold at 87. In fact, you may not have 1 hour in the day that actually got sold at exactly $87. Unless the job took to the minute what we quoted the customer in dollars. We always talk to our customers in dollars. And like I mentioned, we talk to our technicians in time. We give them the sold time and the work order. That may seem like a simple thing, but I see some shops that talk to their customers in time all the time, and they talk to their techs in dollars. Customers understand dollars, technicians understand time. How much time do I have to get this diagnosis done? And if I can't find it, I stop because the money the customer is willing to pay is over. We need to tell the customer what we did, call the customer, tell them what we did, what we found, and what we want to continue testing. We're not God. We don't have God in a box. When a customer comes in and says, do you have the machine? The dealership has the machine. We just roll it over and hook it up to the car, and it tells us everything that's wrong with the car. It's not that simple. Cars are complicated. They're far more complicated than they've ever been. And so what you say you charge in an hour is not what you collect in an hour. For example, if you do an oil change, and this is just an example of it's a little bit dated as far as the dollars go, but if your oil change is, some people are doing $40 oil changes, but let's go 60. An oil change, an LOF, we call an LOF a labor opportunity of the future, which simply means that when we're doing an oil change, there needs to be an inspection every single time, a written inspection done every single time, done the exact same way, that every technician does the exact same inspection every single time. We point out what we found to the customer. Don't be afraid to tell them the work needs to be done if it needs to be done. People say, well, they go into a shop, they spent more. No, they didn't spend more. We say, this is what needs to be done. And I believe it's an injustice to see work that needs to be done and not tell the customer because we're afraid to tell them. Again, most of your customers, they know you, they like you, they trust you. So if you say their brakes are down to 10%, they know you're telling the truth. When we do the LOF, the labor opportunity future, the oil change, we do an inspection every single time. So an oil change is going to take at least a half hour, maybe 45 minutes. And if it's $60, when we take off the retail amount for the oil and filter, no longer are we making $87 an hour. It's significantly less with every single oil change. When you're doing a tire repair, it doesn't usually work out to $87 an hour. Now, when you're doing a charging system test, let's say you charge $35 and it takes 0.3. Well, at the shop's labor rate here, that's $116 an hour. And that's a low labor rate as we saw with this shop. But if you calculate with your shop a charging system diagnosis that may take 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 6 minutes or 8 minutes, we don't charge by the hour really. We charge by the procedure. We say it's going to cost you this much for an AVR test or a charging system diagnosis. They say, okay, we do the test. Maybe it was 6 minutes or 8 minutes or 10 minutes. It doesn't matter. We know what the results are and we know what the customer needs, battery, alternator, starter, whatever. We know. We don't just guess at it. I love when people come in and their light's still on and they've already replaced their alternator, the starter, and the battery, and the light's still on and they're having some issues. They threw parts at it. Well, we don't want to do that. We want to diagnose and find out exactly what it needs first. And so if you could do, even 10 minutes, you could do 6 in an hour, 6 times a labor rate of $100 an hour. That's $600 an hour in labor rate. Now, we don't charge $600 an hour, but if you're charging $60 or $50 for something that took 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 8 minutes, then the effective labor rate is much higher. If we're doing a factory recommended service, a 96,000 K on a vehicle, and the book calls for 4 hours, and maybe it takes us 2.5 or 3 because we've done them so many times, the effective labor rate changes. So if you're not tracking your effective labor rate, I want to encourage you to do that, to calculate what your effective labor rate is, because what we say we're charging in an hour and we're actually charging an hour are two completely different things. Now, the next thing I want to show you is what we call the gross profit calculator. And I want to show you two. Some of you, and I just turned the screen off just so you know, it just looks nicer when you're looking at a screen but that doesn't have this, the things changing of the screen. Back in the days of transparencies, I always turned the projector off. When I put a new slide on, I thought it didn't look very nice when you were calculating or changing the transparency. This is what we call the gross profit calculator, and I'm not going to get into the detail of the difference between markup and gross profit. The difference is huge. For those of you that were in Laval last week, I asked the question, you want to sell a part for, or buy a part for $3 and you want to sell it for 80% gross profit? We had several different answers. I've seen one city I was training in, Raleigh, North Carolina, where we had 30-some people in the room. We had 20 different answers to the same question. There's a lot of confusion about productivity, or gross profit versus markup. I'm going to encourage you never to think in the terms of markup, only think in the terms of gross profit. When you look at an income statement, it shows you the sales, the cost of goods sold, the gross profit. It doesn't show you markup on an income statement. Now, if you're using something like QuickBooks or MYOB or whatever you're using, Sage, when you look at the income statement, the calculation, the column is gross profit, or the line item. But in the background, you tell it if you want 30% markup or 30% gross profit. In reality, markup is a verb, it's what you do in the background. Gross profit is the noun, it's what you get. And so while markup is happening in the background in QuickBooks, you tell it, I want 30% markup or 30% gross profit. When you look at an income statement, it only shows you the gross profit. It does not show you the markup. We recommend that we use a matrix. And it would take me probably a half hour to explain all of the background with this and the selling parts of this. When somebody says, I saw the part cheaper online, we need an answer. When somebody says, I saw it cheaper at the parts store down the street, we need an answer. When somebody says, I phoned the dealership, when we were in Laval, we phoned some dealerships and we saw a dealership that had a part that was cheaper in the parts department than it was in the service department. That happens a lot. A lot of dealerships, not all, but will have a different price in their parts department than their own service department, because technically as a dealership is selling parts to its own business, but another department, the parts department is technically selling the part to the service department, so there's an administration fee that happens, and plus the service department typically adds a much better warranty to the part than it would be when you took it out from the parts department. So the parts department is the takeout price, the service department is the installed price. It's like when you go to the grocery store and buy a raw steak, and you go into a nice steak restaurant and you buy a steak. It could be the same size as the one in the grocery store, but you're not getting it for $5.99 a pound or whatever. You're paying a lot more because it's been cooked and all the service. Same thing with you. You're not handing somebody a part over the counter with a little bit of a warranty. You're installing it on the car and you're going to take care of it. You handed it to a licensed technician or an ASC certified technician. They installed it. They installed it correctly. You're offering a 24-month, 24,000 or 24,000 mile or kilometer warranty. We believe that your warranty should be 24, excuse me, 24 months, 24,000 kilometers or miles or whatever. So back to this, when it comes to the part, all you need to do is put in the price of the part. So if you bought a part for $2.75, it tells you that you sell it for $13.75. If you bought a part for $5.75, you sell it for $23. And I'm sending you an article called Pricing Parts Profitably. And it tells you what to say to a customer who says they saw it online cheaper, they saw it on eBay cheaper. And again, it could be the same, they think the same part, but it could have been a higher quality part. Some people are phoning around and getting white box cheap prices. And we all know as experts that there's a varying quality of parts and some parts that we will definitely not install in a customer's vehicle. So this is how this matrix works. Just so you know, the average part costs approximately between $25 and $30. If you took all the parts that you bought, took how much money you spent, divided by the line items, you are going to see what your average price is. And in a class, I'll ask people, and usually people guess higher, $50, $75, but it's not. It's closer to $25. Now, if you specialize in German vehicles or whatever, imports, then it may be a little bit higher, but it's not going to be a whole lot higher than about $40, maybe $45. I've done the math. The reason I'm saying that is because the sweet spot in this matrix is going to be in this $25 to $45 range. This is where you absolutely must focus your attention on using your parts matrix. Do not use list. I'm not going to get into a reason why you don't use list. The article that I'm sending you explains what list really means. It's not what we think it means, and why you never use list. Don't even ask what the list price is. Take your cost, plug it into the matrix, and charge what you need to charge. It doesn't matter if it's from a parts store. It doesn't matter if it's from a dealership. You use the exact same matrix regardless of if you bought it from a dealership or not. And again, I don't get into the detail on this short webinar, but in the article you'll see why I teach it the way I do and why it does work. So when a part is $36, which is going to be a fair number of them in that range, you sell it for $80. Now this matrix works, and it works really well. And it works well if you're going to put it into some shop management software. This session, of course, is being sponsored by GEMINAR, and I can tell you they have done the best job of any software company I've worked with in fixing and doing what we call smart pricing, or what we call algorithmic calculations. Here's one of the problems with this matrix, and it does work. You get a higher gross profit on lower ticket items, less money, but a higher gross profit in percentage. And with higher ticket items, an engine, a transmission, you're not going to get 50% gross profit, 80% gross profit on a very expensive item. A good example of this is coffee. You go to Starbucks, you buy a coffee for $4, most of that money goes to them. The gross profit is huge. It's over 90%. So it didn't cost them a lot, but it's only a $4 item or a $2 item or a $3 item, whatever. When you go to buy a brand new car, which is a lot of money, it certainly isn't 50% gross profit or 80% gross profit. They would sell no cars. Those are actually a much higher ticket item. More money they collect, yes, than a $3 part, but the gross profit percentage, how much they get to keep, is going to be a much lower percentage. So we suggest that you range between 30% on the lowest end of gross profit, 80% on the high end. And I want to make something clear about gross profit. Because this is a gross profit calculator, not markup, the highest your gross profit could be is 100%. Gross profit cannot exceed 100%. Markup can and does, but gross profit does not. Gross profit, by definition, is how much of the money that you just collected do you get to keep. The only way you could get 100% gross profit is if somebody gave you $5 and you gave them something that cost you nothing. My son said, if you steal something and sell it, is that 100% gross profit? The answer is yes. Now, in our industry, maybe it's tires. A customer comes in, they buy tires, they have old tires, 30% tread, they don't want them, they're moving away, they don't have room, whatever, so we keep them. Because one day a 12% is going to come in and say, do you have used tires? Now, they cost you nothing. And let's say you sold the tires for $25 each. You just collected $100. You paid nothing for them. So that $100 is yours. It goes right to your bottom line. You get to keep the full $100. There's nobody to give any money to because they were free. If you sold those tires for $30 each, and you collected $120, you keep the whole $120, which is 100% gross profit. So 100% gross profit is impossible unless you got something for free, and no matter what you sold it for, you get to keep 100% of that money. When you buy a cup of coffee, they have to pay for the coffee, the milk, the sugar, the cream, whatever they're putting, flavoring, and of course, Starbucks, and you get a fancy drink, you're going to pay more because they're putting more in it, but the gross profit percentage is extremely high. And just for the record, the most profitable legal substance in the world is popcorn at the movie theater. When they sell you popcorn for $8 or $9 or $10 and they pay 13 cents for it, that's huge gross profit. The money at theaters is not in the movie, it's in the concession. I think most of us know that, if not all of us. If you're buying an item for $1,325, you plug it in there, you sell it for $1,892. Now this matrix does work, and I think everybody, at least live, is using GEMINAR. For those of you that are listening and not using GEMINAR, most shop management systems you can't build this into. Some you can, not all of them. And I'm not going to get into all the detail about specifically what GEMINAR does, but I've worked with Matthew, who's the president of the company, who's an amazing man. I was so impressed in Laval when I was asking people, who's your favorite leader? And over half the people in the room mentioned Matthew, the owner of GEMINAR. He's an amazing guy. And when he saw what we were doing with the matrix, he immediately made changes to the matrix they have. But I wanted to show you a little problem with the matrix, okay? Because it works this way, it has to go down in dollars or gross profit percentage as it goes up in dollars. So let's say you bought a part, sorry about my voice, and it was $3. But all of a sudden, the vendor puts that price up to $3.01. So now, instead of making $15, we paid 1 cent more. It brought us down to $12.04. So what happened was this. The matrix has to bring this number down as this number goes up. The problem was a 1 cent difference here makes a 5% difference there. And again, that's how it works. But I developed what I call an algorithmic calculator. And so the difference, instead of going from 70 or 80 to 75, I'll show you, and I'm sending you this calculator. By the way, I'm sending you that one, and I'm sending you the algorithmic calculator as well. And I'll turn the screen back on, the algorithmic calculator. It's simpler to use in that you don't have to look down on the left-hand side and put the number between 3 and 8 or 25 and 35. There's one purchase price place, that's it. So it doesn't matter what the price cost. Let's go back to the example of our $3.01 part. Instead of going from 80% to 75, which the last matrix did, it came down by 0.01%. Now, I didn't create the spreadsheet. I had the concept, excuse me, and I know somebody who's brilliant at spreadsheets, and I said, could you go down from 80% on the first one to 79.5 to 79 to, excuse me, 78.5 in the background? And being the most anal retentive person I know, he spent extra time on it and went down. So if you saw the background of this, and if we had every line here, it would be page after page after page after page after page, because it goes 79.99, 79.8, 79.97. So if we bought a part and it was $3.05, it's selling it for 79.95. If we're selling that part for, let's go, $5.75, it's selling at 77.25. So in the last one, it was coming down 5%. In some of the columns, rows, I should say, higher numbers as it got to bigger numbers down below, but now it's one place to put in the whole thing. This tells you automatically what your gross profit percentage is, 77.25. Our goal is that you get 70% overall gross profit, and it tells us that we just made $19.52, and really big letters there, sorry, it tells us that that sold for $25.27. So all we need to do, let's go back to that $26.50 part. Our algorithmic calculator with tens of thousands of calculations happening in the background tells us it's calculating that at 64.25%. The profit was $47.63. The selling price was $74.13. Now again, because there's so many tens of thousands of calculations, GEMINAR can't handle this either. It just can't. We've made it way too complicated for a software program to handle. So what Matthew has done is, in his software, you can turn this on or off. I suggest you keep it on. It will automatically add 2% to everything. Every single part you sell will automatically add 2%. Now that's because you can and you shouldn't use list. Also, that money is more than enough to be able to pay for your GEMINAR system. What Matthew did do, which was absolutely brilliant, is what it'll do, and I just want to go back to the other one, because again, that one cannot be built into a shop management system. So what I want to do is pull up the last one and show you what Matthew he's a genius. He really is a very smart man. So let's say that you had, let's go with a higher number. Let's say that you bought a part for $35. Sorry, I'm looking at a big screen and typing on a smaller monitor in a different computer. And now it's $35.01. Oops, $35.01. I'm looking at a 23-inch monitor typing on a laptop with a 15-inch. So the difference in that 1 cent is even bigger here because it's more money. So instead of making $87.50, we made $77.80. So what Matthew did, which was absolutely brilliant, is his software, and you turn it on, it's called Option 99, will automatically do this for you. In addition to the 2%, which we recommend you do, you turn on Option 99, and what it does in the background is it will take that $35 and give you the full 35 at the 60%. And then it will take anything over that at the lower amount. So let me make this $49, okay? Oh, sorry. Again, I'm trying to look at one screen and type on another. Let's go $49. That one's showing, no, I can't go more than 45 in this line because it says right there I can't. We set it up that way. So what he's saying is that if you had a $45 part, his software will automatically calculate the first $35 at the 60%, and the 55% is only going to calculate at the difference between the 35 and 45, which is the $10. This was his idea. It works extremely well. It's absolutely brilliant because the software can't do the thousands and thousands of calculations between here and here. I mean, you think about this, it's going 55%, 55.01, 55.02, 55.0. It goes on, thousands of calculations. So what GEMINAR did, again, just to be very clear, they are going to give you your full 60% on that $35, and they're going to give you that 10% less on the next $10. So you're still going to get an extremely high gross profit. Kevin, who's the trainer, the main trainer, lead trainer for GEMINAR, and I have worked on this calculation. And if you use GEMINAR option 99 and the 2%, you're going to be able to do the same thing as this calculator. The other option that you can do is with the calculator, the algorithmic, is you can just use it as a standalone Excel spreadsheet on your computer, and again, I'm sending it to you. So the algorithmic, sorry, I just pulled up the same one. The algorithmic calculator is a simple spreadsheet. You can have this on your computer, and it will allow you to just do the math right away. So, I mean, look how fast the estimating is. You are going to estimate in your software anyway, and you just bought a part that was $54. It tells you that you're going to get 49.90 gross profit, and you're going to make $53.78, and you're going to sell it for $107.78. We're talking seconds. A part costs $100, we sell it for $195. A part costs $1,325, we sell it for $2,038. I've done the math on this. If you are going from list or allowing whatever software most, or matrix that most software has, and you go to this in a 3-bay shop like Carol's, it'll be $54,000 net profit. That's over $100,000 gross profit. It's going to give you $54,000 approximately in net profit to the bottom line dollars simply by using what we call this algorithmic calculator. So I wanted to show you a few more things, and then I want to talk briefly about what we're going to do in our group. And I want to show you what I think is the minimum amount of information that you should see every single month. And I'm just going to try to pull up another document. And I want to show you a simple spreadsheet that I'm going to be sending to you. And I believe what you should do every single month at the end of the month, maybe a couple days into the next month, because you want to wait for maybe some of your information, is what you want to do. Sorry. What you want to do is use the spreadsheet, which will take approximately 5 minutes to do. Now, I'm going to try to do something a little bit tricky here, and I'm hoping this is going to work. I'm kind of a guy who takes some risks sometimes, and I'm going to try, although I have 2 screens I'm working on, I'm going to try to split the one screen. And what I'm looking at here, and for those of you that were in Laval, this is not going to do it. For those of you that were in Laval, we looked at an income statement, and we looked at a real shop that has 3 technicians, and I want to show you how simple this is to do. And what I'm going to do is take this information here, and I'm going to put it into what we call the income statement analysis tool to show you how quick this is. This is a real shop for 1 month. So all you do is type in the number of months up here. And I look at big picture first so you can see what we're trying to do here. No, what we are doing, not trying to do. This is an income statement analysis tool. I believe this is the minimum that you should know about your shop every single month. Minimum. You want to know labor, parts, sublet, tires, shop supplies, other, and sales. The cost of goods sold to go along with that. The gross profit to go along with that. And what we call key performance indicators. And key performance indicators are, of course, you plug in your labor rate, how many technicians you have, how many repair orders you wrote, how many days open, how many hours per day, and it's going to give you all of this information. You are going to see your gross profit overall, your labor gross profit, your parts gross profit, labor mix. In other words, what percentage came in the door came from labor, what your hourly revenue is, what your labor potential could have been with the number of technicians you had, how many days open, and your labor rate. It'll show you what you did sell, proficiency, as we looked at earlier, will tell you what percentage that you did sell. It'll calculate your average RO size in dollars. It will show how many repair orders in the day, labor hours per repair order, and your net profit in dollars. Now, for the purpose of doing this, for the first time especially, or the first few times, I'm going to encourage you to not do all of this expense portion that's here. It goes from accounting down all the way down here to waste disposal. There's no way anybody on this call is going to have exactly 41 lines on your expenses or whatever it happens to be here. We're looking at line 41, but some lines are, doesn't start at 1 in the expense category. It starts up there, so it starts actually at 15. So if we look from accounting down to waste disposal, your income statement is not going to mirror image this. It just won't. And I'm not asking you to change your income statement to match it with here. What I am going to encourage you to do is when you get your income statement, always have the percentages. Whether you get them from your accountant, you tell your accountant or your bookkeeper, I want the percentage of income column. A lot of them never turn it on. They don't turn it on. I'd say 90% of income statements I've seen do not have percentages, and that's laziness in my opinion, or they just think you don't care, or I don't know why they do it. It's going into QuickBooks and typing in to preferences and instantly showing you the percentages. Once you see those percentages, it shows you the percentages of every expense item on there. You no longer need to do this part of the income statement analysis tool. So what I recommend that you do, which you can do in minutes in a month, is fill in these lines. It'll calculate everything else for you. You fill this in, and you're going to see the KPIs that you need to see. Do not take the time to fill this in, because all it's going to show you is the percentage column anyway. Now, we'd like to see it because maybe some of your expenses are higher than they should be, and so if your expenses are more than 40%, then maybe you do want to look back in a little bit more detail. But again, the percentages you can see from your income statement. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to recommend that you take your total expenses from your income statement. I like to put it under line 41, waste disposal, which I think is a great place to put all your expenses anyway, kind of like waste disposal. So put all of your expenses on one line. If you try to match them up, it'll be frustrating. You'll say, I need to combine this one and this one because it calls it this on this income statement, but you've got something on yours that says MasterCard discounts or Visa discounts, or you've got maybe 52 lines and here there's less, or vice versa. You may have less lines, there's more here. Take one line, put it all in there. So what I want to do is I want to take the real financial statements for a real shop and show you really how quickly this can happen. And I'm trying to get my mouse to pull this up again. I know you can't see the meeting information that I'm looking at here, but it shows me how many people online, etc. I'm going to turn this off for a second, and tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to set up this. And by the way, if you're not using dual monitor, especially if you're doing bookkeeping or accounting, I'm going to encourage you to use a dual monitor. Right now, I am duplicating it, so everything on my laptop is being seen on the screen. And then I'm going to pull up and extend it so I can see the income statement on the other screen. And what I'm trying to show you here on this screen. And I am trusting, again, I'm doing this for the very first time the way I'm doing it. Now, I need to see what you're seeing. I have to look at another view there to see the view you see, because I'm not certain what screen you are seeing. And for some reason, it's not showing me that. Okay, in the chat, can somebody please tell me, are you seeing something that says income statement March 2017 for Elite Auto Care, or are you seeing income statement analysis tool ISAT Kelly the Coach? And normally I have a monitor on this, Kevin King, with so you are seeing income statement analysis tool. Oh, thank you very much. Normally I have Kevin on the call, and he can let me know if the microphone's too loud or not loud enough, but he is on a trip with his family and he's got good priorities. I appreciate that. So just so you know what I'm doing, is I am taking the information from the income statement and I'm reading it from another screen, and it would be just like you were doing it for yours. So the sales here, and I'm going to type it in just like you would. I'm not going to cut and paste it and make it look like it's simpler than it is, unless you can cut and paste as well. So this is a real shop with 3 technicians for a month. Their labor sales were $25,582. Their part sales were $31,922.32. Now, if you showed me your income statement for the first time, I've never seen them before, I don't know anything about your shop, the very first thing I want to see is what are your labor sales versus your part sales. In most shops, and I don't exaggerate when I say most shops see more money from parts than labor. If your part sales exceed your labor sales, you have a big problem. It's not that hard to fix, but it is a problem because every day you sell labor, sometimes without parts. A person, you do an inspection, they're buying a vehicle, they don't buy the vehicle because of the results of the inspection. They paid you for the inspection, you didn't sell them any parts. A person comes in and you're swapping over the winter tires for the summer tires. There's labor there, there's no parts. Same thing happens at the other season. A person comes in, they think they need brake inspection, you inspect the brakes, but they don't need brakes, they just wanted a brake inspection because they were noisy. A person comes in and maybe you spend 2 hours diagnosing what the problem is, and the solution is a butt connector, and so the labor sales greatly exceed the part sales. And in a lot of shops, that first hour or 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours in the morning is inspections and diagnosis. What's wrong with the car? What's wrong with the car? What's wrong with the car? Customer comes in, what's the vehicle doing that it shouldn't? What's it doing that it should? Vice versa. We need to find out what's wrong. We diagnose. There's no parts being sold at that time. In most cases, we go ahead with the repair. Sometimes after we've diagnosed it, they don't want to spend the money, and we sold them diagnosis charge for it, but we didn't effect the repair. The bottom line is, in today's world, we spend a lot more time finding what the problem is than actually installing parts. Labor gross profit should be 75%. We would like to see you get 75% gross profit on your labor. We'd like you to get 50% gross profit on your parts. And if you use the algorithmic calculator or use it the way it's set up with option 99 in GEMINAR, you should be able to get 50% gross profit on your parts. You should. But labor is more profitable. You're not going to give the technician half of your labor rate. A technician would receive about 25% of the labor rate. So if your labor rate's 100, that would mean the tech would make about $25 an hour. Your $75 is your gross profit. I sold the labor, an hour of labor for 100. I paid the tech 25. I'm left with $75. That's 75%. Labor is the most profitable thing you sell. It's more profitable than parts. And yet, you sell more labor than parts, less parts than labor. You sell labor at a higher gross profit. Parts is a lower gross profit. And yet most shops see more money from parts than labor. It's because we have a labor leak. We're not selling the labor. We're not charging for everything. We're not getting paid for everything. Something took longer than we thought, and we didn't want to correct and say to the customer, well, it's more than we said. We just think, well, let's just eat that. And when the techs are not working, or you're looking for keys, or moving cars, or doing a comeback, or whatever it is, those are the things that we're not getting paid for that time. What's really bad is when we're doing the work and not getting paid for it. And I guess the question that you need to ask yourself is, how much free work do you do? I know people who don't charge for an AVR test. I know people who do super, super cheap oil changes. I know people who don't charge for tire repair because I hope they're going to buy tires. I know people who do free scans. They've got a handheld scanner and they walk up to the customer and they pull the codes and they don't charge them for that. I know people who will go out to the parking lot and do what we call a PLO, the parking lot opinion, where you walk out to the car and you're checking out the car on the lot. You don't have the information in the computer yet. Maybe you don't know the customer, maybe you do, but the car's not in the bay. There's no room in the bays anyway because it's just full. So let's go out, open the hood, open whatever under the dash, and I'm going to try to find out what's wrong. We call that the parking lot opinion, where you're not charging for the customer for time that you're spending because you're not fixing anything. You're just looking at it, and we don't just look at it anyway. We believe that a car should never be diagnosed on the lot. we say to the customer, leave it with us, get the information from the customer if you've never seen them before, and then give them an amount of money that you're going to quote to do the diagnosis. I'm going to encourage you to no longer do parking lot opinions. No more free work. Now, if the customer is an amazing customer and they want you to replace the wiper blades and they spend $5,000 a year, that's not what we're talking about. But what we're talking about is a labor leak in many shops where they're selling 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day. Vito, you mentioned in the class that you're selling less hours than you have available. If you bought 8 spark plugs, you want to sell 8 spark plugs. If you bought 8 hours, you want to sell 8 hours. And you can. You absolutely can. When you look at somebody like Scott, who does $53,000 a month per tech, he is getting paid for what he does. My goal as a coach is so simple. I'd like you to get paid for everything you do at the right amount of money. So back to the income statement analysis tool. The sublet was $5,375.32. For the people that were in Laval, we were going through and doing this manually. I wanted to teach it manually, but I said there's a way that you could do it electronically. And the reason we do it manually first is so that you know the math. And just to let you know, I already sent out the workbook to everybody in Laval, but not everybody watching this is in Laval and was at the class. I'm sending you the workshop, the full-day workshop called Set Your GPS for Success. Not the training that goes along with that, but the actual workbook itself. So if you want to do these calculations manually, it shows you how to do that. The idea here is it gives you a chance to be able to do it quickly, but you, at least when you do the math manually, you better understand the calculations. It's like in school, in math, your answer was right, you get your mark back, and it said 50% because you didn't show your work. And they would say, what's the answer? And below you had to say, I did this and this, this and this to get this answer. But if you didn't show how you got the answer, you didn't show your work, you get half marks. And what they were saying is, you have the right answer, but you don't understand the math. And they were onto something. If you don't understand the calculations, and you're looking at the answers, you don't know how the calculations were done, that doesn't help a lot. So looking at the income statement for the shop, again, I'm doing that on another screen. They paid their technicians, again, this is a real shop. They paid their technicians a total of $11,500. By the way, this is labor cost only. So how much you paid your technicians. It does not include payroll benefits or burdens. It does not include EI, CPP, workers' comp, holiday pay. For the parts that we sold, we paid the vendors $18,092.59. This is kind of interesting. Like I said, I've never done it this way on a webinar before. Our sublet, we paid $38.16.96. The tires were $23.23.83. And the tires or the shop supplies, he didn't track it, which is fine. I don't think you should. Yes, you want to see how much you sold your shop supplies for, but if you were to track your cost, you would have to know every single time you bought brake cleaner from a vendor that you bought parts from, how much was brake cleaner and how much was for solvents and such like that. So I'm going to recommend that you don't. Now, if you're anal retentive and you want to figure it out, great. I just suggest that you don't spend all the time doing that. It's a little bit too work, and of course it doesn't change the bottom line. So now we see the information for the shop, and just so you know, I'm switching my screen here. I'll tell you something that's really interesting, by the way, about using a dual monitor, which I use, is one is a touch screen and the other's not. And then there are times that I have to remember that the screen that I'm trying to do as a touch screen is not the touch screen. And by the way, I just invested in this monitor. It's a 23-inch curved Samsung monitor for $400. I mean, it's just insane. I remember buying my first computer for $3,000 with a 12-inch monochrome monitor, and it didn't even have a hard drive. And now you can buy a curved monitor. It's completely insane. So I tell you what I'm doing right now is I'm pulling up the data sheet that goes along with that so I can fill in the other bits of information here. Now you're going to have this at your fingertips when you do this, so it's going to take even less time. Okay, back on the screen. So the labor rate at this shop, looking at the data sheet, 110. Again, this is a real shop. Just for the record, it's in Ontario. They have 3 technicians, 1 advisor, but that's not important right now. Number of repair orders they wrote was 133. They were open 21 working days, and they're open 8 hours in a day. Now we can see, again, what I think is the minimum that you want to see. And I'm going to show you what we like to see in our actual management groups. But what we're going to see here is what we call the key performance indicators. The overall gross profit at the shop is 47%. That means of all the money that came in the door, for every dollar that came in the door, 53 cents went to pay for the parts and the technician's wages and the sublet and the tires and the towing and shop supplies. They were left with 47%. We want a 60% gross profit, as you can see here. So they are 13% low on gross profit. They're not charging enough, or their productivity is low, the efficiency is low maybe, the effective labor rate's low. We need to go back and diagnose it further. For what I do is I do the same thing you do, except I do it with businesses. A customer comes in and tells you what the car is doing that it shouldn't, or what it's not doing that it should. You diagnose what the problem is, you tell them what's causing it, and you say, have this part and fix it. My job with a business is to diagnose it, and that's the financial statements. I go through this, I look, I see where the problems are. Say if it's a labor rate increase, change the labor rate, just like Carol did, and nobody even noticed, right, Carol? But I said 89, you went 86, but we'll talk about that another time. I know you're afraid to go 89, but like I said, even if it was 80, people wouldn't have noticed. A $10 hour increase in a labor rate seems like a lot to a lot of people. But if you're at 1.2 hours per repairer, and the average shop is 1.2 hours per repairer, that is $12 per visit more than it was last year. They don't come in every day. They don't come every week. They don't come in every month. They come in maybe 3 times a year. If they're loyal, they'll come in 3, maybe 4 times a year, closer to 2 for a lot of people. So if I come in 3 times a year and each visit is an average of $12 more, that's $36 a year more than I paid last year. But I didn't buy the same things this year. Yes, I got oil changes like I did last year. But last year I needed brakes. This year I don't need brakes. This year I need brakes. I didn't need brakes last time. 3 years ago I needed brakes, but now I've had calipers done and I didn't need them before. So the brake job is not even the same one I bought 3 years ago. I come in and I buy tires. You're not going to see me for tires for the same car for a few years. I come in and I buy an alternator. I'm not going to be buying another alternator probably for as long as I own this car. We don't buy the same thing every time. So if your oil change price remains the same and your labor rate increases even at $10 an hour, they don't see the difference. So I just want to finish this up and then I want to talk about the group. The labor gross profit is only 57%. It should be 75. So they are 18% low on their labor rate. The parts gross profit is only 43%. They should be 50. They're 7% low on gross profit. Labor mix means that only 38% of the money that came in the door came from labor. It should be at least half of your money. The hourly revenue, $288.24. The labor potential, if they sold the 24 hours a day, 3 techs, 8 hours a day, they could have done at their labor rate $55,440. They only sold $25,583. 46% shop proficiency means they only sold 46% of the hours. The techs were there 8 hours a day, all the days of this month, 21. They were there 504 hours. We only sold 46% of that time, and yet we probably spent 90% of the time, 85% of the time working. Now, maybe it wasn't all income-producing work, moving cars and all those things that we can control. What this really means is this shop could have done the same amount of money with half as many technicians. Now, they have 3 techs, so it's not really possible, 1.5. I mean, I guess it's possible. But I can tell you that the average independent repair shop, average, is between 45 and 55% of the time sold. It's a labor leak. And I assure you, when you take care of the labor leak, you should say you take care of everything else. The average hour size calculated at $504. They're working on 6 cars a day, which is a bit of a car count problem because that's only 2 cars per tech. So I would certainly look at better scheduling for the shop, pre-booking appointments, and all the fixes to go along with that. They are selling 1.7 hours per repair order, which is better than the average shop at 1.2. But our goal is 3, so they need to make every car count. So maybe they don't need more than 3 cars a day. I'd like to see a bit of an increase there, but they need to make every single car count and get the average hours per repair order up and the average dollars per repair order as well. Now the net profit shows there, which is of course not accurate because we didn't put it all into one expense. So I'm just going to go to the income statement again. You're going to do this faster because you're going to have this right at your fingertips. I'm going to take that over and put it here, like I mentioned, under waste disposal. I got to get my mouse back. Oops, down too far, sorry. And waste disposal. Again, I'm sending you this spreadsheet, and all you need to do is fill in the data exactly the way I'm showing you. And in about 5 to 10 minutes per month, you will see everything you need to see. So we know that this shop had 51% of the money going to expenses. That's way too high. And this shop lost $2,521. Now, that's after they paid their technicians, we know. And that's after we see what the shop owner paid to himself. And I'm just looking to see where I see that there. He doesn't do too bad in this sense. He pays his service advisor $3,000 a month, and he paid himself $5,000 as a manager. So he did lose a bit of money, but not that we want to sacrifice salary, which is oftentimes what we do. We need to see the dollars come up. But even though it's a $2,500 loss, he still brought home a $5,000 paycheck, and his service advisor did bring home $3,000. But again, we're looking at a shop here that you've never seen before. You don't even know what city it's in. It's a real shop. I'll say it's in Ontario. The point is that you can do this every single month in 5 or 10 minutes. You can fill in this data. You can go back to this video and watch how it's done. Skip forward to this part if you want, and you're going to be able to see the minimum that you should see every single month, and that's the income statement analysis tool. And you want to be able to see exactly the data that we just looked at. And again, shortly here, I'm going to show you the information in our management group. So I'm just going to spend about 15 more minutes here. We're done the information I wanted to cover. Again, I just want to look at what is involved in our management groups. And I shared this with you a little bit at the session when we were in Laval. And I trust that you're seeing this screen. It's interesting, this audience view has always worked before, but I think everybody should be seeing a "you are here" with a couple of mice looking and says "you are here" in the belly of the snake, and that's certainly not where they want to be. And just in case, again, I don't have a monitor on here. So if somebody could just let me know to make sure you're seeing the "you are here" with the mice, please. I so miss Kevin. Thank you. So the answer is yes. So what we're looking at with the income statement analysis tool is "you are here." And it's showing us exactly where we are. There's 3 things that a GPS does, and the workbook I'm sending you is the GPS, which is the GPS does 3 things. It tells you where you are, you tell it where you want to be, and it tells you how to get there. Sometimes you look at something and, I think it's reversed on me. Again, I apologize because I can't see what you're seeing. But if somebody, again, can let me know. I'm sorry about this little mix-up here. You are here with the mice still, though. Or are you seeing a person standing at a "you are here"? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm a little bit embarrassed with the way this is working out. You're seeing the mice, correct? You're seeing the "you are here." Okay, thank you. So You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make this up to you, and I'm going to send you a complimentary workshop that I've done online. And the one I'm going to choose is the one I talked about earlier, which is selling diagnostic labor. And it is, I think, a 90-minute one that I'm going to be sending you with the workbook and a whole bunch. And I mean a whole bunch. There's probably 12 additional handouts that go along with that. And it'll show you how we believe you should sell your diagnostic labor. And I think that, I know, the biggest, you're welcome, Lisa, the biggest reason that we see less money from labor than parts is because of diagnostics. If you're not charging for your diagnostics, if you're not charging the right amount for your diagnostics, if you're not getting paid for all of your diagnostics, your labor leak is going to be absolutely huge. And so once you learn how to properly sell your diagnostic labor, and I take you through 7 steps that I call the full meal deal, and you will be able to sell your diagnostics at a much higher rate. Now you should be seeing the person in a mall, and I was in the mall in Laval the other day and went over with Kevin, the trainer for GEMINAR, and we first of all went to the map because we needed to see where we're going to go. I already did the You Are Here, I Profit Builder software. I've already covered that with you. We've done the income statement analysis tool. I've introduced you to some key performance indicators, and I have also again, I apologize for my voice, showing you the key benchmarks, and I've just turned that off for just a minute. And it's just a matter of showing you. It does take a little getting used to monitors, but it certainly is awesome. We're building a team. What we're doing is we're putting together a management group, an online group. I ran management groups way back in 1992 in Vancouver. Actually, the fellow who trained me, we talked about him a little bit recently, Bob O'Connor, in the information you received about this class. Bob O'Connor was my mentor, and he trained me. I taught his material. Of course, I've learned a lot since then and I've added to it lots, but the basics or stuff I learned from him, definitely my mentor. He has since passed away, but on his 55th birthday, we went on a trip to Atlanta to visit a parts company, and we were talking about sorry, somebody sent me a message there. Thank you. We were talking about how the implementation happens, and we'd see somebody who would come to a class. They get their binder, they get the notes, they take notes, they go back to the shop. They're going to change things. A month later, they come to the next class. They grab the binder. They come to the class. They take notes. They're going to make changes. They go back. They get way too busy. And yeah, you change your labor rate and those kinds of things, but real change to do a lot of the things we're talking about doesn't happen overnight. And what we learned was the people who do the best were people that are the 2 things we talked about. They know the numbers, the kind of stuff we just looked at, and secondly, they are in a management group. Each of the shops that I just mentioned to you that we visited in Vancouver, all 5 of the shops, in addition to the one on day 1 that sucked, really low gross profit on parts, really low gross profit on labor. They were not tracking productivity, efficiency. They didn't have a time clock. They weren't tracking that stuff. All 5 of the other shops that I'm talking about were in a management group way back in the early 90s, and they're still in not the same group, but a different group today. Being in a group holds you accountable. And instead of going to a training, which is like a marathon, and you do the big long race and then you're done, what a management group is a series of sprints that every single week you're doing something to further your business, whether it's training for you, whether it's looking at your composite, whatever it might be. It is an opportunity to work together as a team. You learn from me, I learn from you, you learn from Carol, Vito brings in his information, Lisa says, I did this and it worked, and we work together. Nobody knows everything. But everybody in this call is better at something than everybody else on this call. There's something you do that nobody else can do as good as you can. And when you bring those people together and we work together, I ran management groups throughout the United States with WorldPac. I ran groups in Canada with Napa. The reason we're launching an online group is simple. It's less travel for me. Traveling, I've been on over 2,200 flights. Traveling is not fun. It's also very expensive for the participants, whether you're flying off to a meeting or driving to a meeting, you're away from your shop. Some of those groups you're away 10 full days a year. Another one you're away 9 days a year. Another one's 12 days a year. Some are even more. So you're leaving your shop, you're going away, and that's helpful, but very expensive and a lot of time away from the shop. So what I did is I put together an online group, so you don't have to travel, you don't spend the money. It's a lot less expensive for us to run it. It's a lot less expensive for you to run it. We don't need to have, look at that meeting in Laval. The food was amazing. The room was a really nice room, but it was extremely expensive for Matthew to put that on. In an online group, it's a lot less expensive. So we're building a team is what I was saying here. Just a little bit about teamwork itself. These guys are rowing. That's definitely a team. I like this little quote: the success of teamwork coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. And honestly, of all the stuff I do, I train, I coach, I run groups. My favorite is groups, because groups is where the real change happens. Groups is where people are doing $45,000 a month, $50,000 a month. In a training session, what I call a wake-up call, where people might be there for the first time. They've never been in a management class, and yet they've been in business for years, and they're in a management class. And it's a wake-up call, I call it. And I say, if I do my job well, then you won't sleep tonight. But those are the people who are asking, how do I pay $170 a month for software? I don't have that. How can I afford an advisor? How can I afford more rent? How can I paint my building? How can I buy that lift? How can I, and if you're asking the questions, where's the money going to come from? The emphasis is almost always in the wrong spot. When you're doing $40,000 a month per technician, 42, 43, 45, 50,000, whatever it is, most people in this call is going to be closer to about $48,000 a month per tech based on your labor rates. When you're consistently doing $48,000 a month with 3 technicians, you're not asking the question, how am I going to pay for GEMINAR at $170 a month? You're not asking the question, where's the money coming from to paint my building? Scott, the fellow that I just mentioned, he did 53,000. I mean, in my career, that is beyond belief. I mean, it's awesome. He doesn't do it every month. He consistently does 48 to 50, sometimes 51, but 53 was his best. You know what he did? He took and shut his shop down for 3 days and sent all of his technicians to SEMA down in Las Vegas. What a beautiful gift for his employees. I like this little cartoon here. It's these 2 dogs. It's all about teamwork. And we've got the branch manager, but we've also got the assistant branch manager. I had somebody say to me, by the way, one time, that if a person needs coaching to run their business, they should have never started in the first place. And that would, like you being the driver of this car and having no team. How many races could you win if you didn't have a team of people to do everything they need to do every single time you make a pit stop? A hockey team with 1 player wouldn't do well. A football team with 1 player wouldn't do well. When people say, you know, they should never have started in the first place, my response is, every professional athlete needs a coach, every single one. I'm going to take just a little bit of time, and I know that this may seem overwhelming to you, but I want to show you what we're looking at in our management groups as far as it goes with financial data. And I wouldn't start with this, of course. That wouldn't be fair because it's extremely complicated. I just got to pull this over. And it's what we call the algorithmic calculator. And I'll be turning on the monitor in just a second. And I know what I'm going to do to make this easier. Again, if you've got any questions, my email address you already have, kelly@kellythecoach.com, and you can send me questions that you have. I know sometimes you go to a class and you leave with more questions than answers because there's so very much to learn. On your screen is what we call a detailed composite, and this is ultimately where we're headed. If you're not tracking your numbers really well, income statement analysis tool is a great place to start. Again, I showed you 5 to 10 minutes a month. It'll show you those key performance indicators. In our management groups, it's a higher level. And does it happen right away? The answer is no. When you join a group, the first thing that we do with you individually is individual coaching. You spend time with me individually. You spend time with Kevin, the GEMCAR trainer, individually. He's now working with me in our management groups. And we send you the tools. We also send you webinars on how to do this, but we get you up to snuff. I have the fellow that I just talked about, by the way, he sent me that message that you saw pop up. He's just had his best month he's ever had. I do individual coaching with him every single week. But next month, he's going to be in part of the group where he's going to come in with his, he's going to come in running. I tell you the thing that I found with management groups, whether it was ones in Canada or the US, each time a new member would come, so much of our live meeting time was spent bringing that new person up to snuff. And there would be complaints, and rightly so, from members who've been in a long time. I'm in a meeting, we're going through the composite, and somebody's saying, well, how do I increase my labor rate? What's the difference between gross profit and markup? What is productivity? How do you calculate efficiency? And so now you are, in a sense, you've got grade 12 students, but you're actually now at third year university. And so when you go to university, you don't want to be repeating grade 12 almost every day or every meeting in this case. So what I've done is I've created online training. So when a person wants to join a group, they are required to watch the webinars first. I have a questionnaire that I ask the tests, rightly so. Do you understand it? You got to show the work. And I want everybody up to snuff. So instead of in a meeting somebody says, what is productivity and efficiency? There's a webinar that you can watch in your own time, and that'll bring you up to snuff. How do I build this composite? Well, when we've been in a group for a year, we don't want to take time every meeting to show you how to fill in the composite. So before a person is in the live group, they go online, they watch the webinar, they work with their coach, and now when they come into the live meeting with everybody else, all the other shops in the group, your composite's already done. You know what you're doing, you're up to snuff, and so basically everybody's at that third level university, not somebody at third level university and somebody back in grade 12. What we look at here is a composite that tracks month after month after month, and I love it because you get a chance to see your trending. Now, I am not going to cover all 137 lines of this composite. That's not what the purpose of this is. And of course, I have a webinar that teaches you how to fill in this entire composite. But it's brilliant to be able to see how many new customers you had. This is a real shop. So they tracked. In January, they brought in 45 new customers, February 45, March was a little low. Look at that in June, they got up to 64 new customers, or sorry, 56. Well, if you're in a group and you only brought in 8 new customers and they brought in 56, you'd say, how did you do that? The quick ratio, I won't get into the detail on that. This shop's doing well financially. They don't have any amounts of money in receivables, but somebody in a group may have $23,000 in receivables, and so we help coach you how to collect that money and how to stop giving people credit and how to learn to say no. How many days open? That's pretty straightforward. This shop has 4 technicians on staff. They paid 590 hours that month in technicians. They fill in this month, this amount, these amounts down here that we're looking at. And they didn't have any pre-booked appointments. The shop just doesn't see the value, but you might be in a group with somebody who has 200 pre-booked appointments that month or 80 pre-booked appointments, and you go, wow, how do you do that? We have a guy in the group, and I don't exaggerate, he has over 1,000 pre-booked appointments. He books his customers spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter. When you're there in the spring, you know when you're coming in the fall, or in the summer. When you're there in the summer, you know when you're coming back. When you're putting on your winter tires, you're taking off your winter tires, they already have your appointment to come back and have your winter tires put back on. Most people pre-plan their lives. We know when the hairdresser we're going to see. We know when we're going to go to the dog groomer. They pre-book. We know when we're going to go to the dentist. We know when we're going to the chiropractor or whatever it is. We're in a world where we're busy, and so we're pre-planning things. And to be able to pre-plan your car repair is huge for your customers. It will show you the repair orders per day. In this case, the shop's at 9.35. Their average dollar repair order, and you can see the trending. Are you going up? Are you going down? We're starting to see a shop go down. Well, that may be a problem, but the problem may be may be helpful in that their car count is going up. It shows us sold hours per repair order. The labor rate was only $89. Again, this is a real shop. It calculates their effective labor rate. So they say they're collecting or charging 89. They're actually only collecting 80.88. Their effective labor rate percentage means that they're collecting 90, almost 91% of their $89. To me, line 16 is the most important on the entire page. This month they collected 90%. They did better this month. They collected 94%, 96%. But our bench, 99, they got it to September. They got there. They're getting better for sure. They're heading in the right direction. Our goal is 135%. So this shop started in a smaller area or lower number. They're getting a lot higher. Only 9.13% of their time was unbilled. Their effective labor rate percentage was 109%, or labor to parts ratio, I should say. We looked at the income statement, and I mentioned to you that most shops, not all, but most shops see more money from parts than labor. This shop is seeing $1.09 in labor this month, $1.14 this month, $1.12 this month, $1.15. We're looking at labor, $1.03, $1.05. So this shop every single month consistently sees more money from labor than parts. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. This part is similar to the income statement analysis tool, all the revenue calculations, the cost of goods sold calculations. And by the way, the benchmarks are there for every single one of these lines. We see the gross profit on tires, the gross profit on sublet. We see the total cost of goods sold, and we see the overall gross profit. It tells us right here that the benchmark is 60%. You saw that on the income statement analysis tool as well. February, they did 50%, 55%, 52%. To be able to see your numbers like this every single month, where am I headed? This number's coming up. That's great. This number's going down. I need to focus on that. This is the kind of stuff that big businesses see this. They see this data. Large corporations, most small businesses don't see this. We don't have somebody helping us put this together. One thing I really like about this particular composite is it breaks down expenses, not alphabetically like we see in ISAT or in almost every single income statement, QuickBooks included. You see a breakdown alphabetically. What we did is we broke it down by category. So we see the facility expenses. And we see down here that 10% of the money that came in the door from sales went to their facility. Again, I'm not going to read every line of this. Then we see vehicle expense. How much money that came in the shop went to fuel, rental vehicles for customers, insurance, lease, repairs, and maintenance. We see that only $75 this month went to lease expense or vehicle expense. This month was $296. I'd question what happened there. So you're looking at these numbers and say, what? And again, in income statement analysis tool, I don't suggest you get into those numbers. But in this case, I suspect you start to break it down. If there's a problem, analyze it. If it's not in a problem, it doesn't matter. Then we get into the financial expenses. How much money that came in your door was for depreciation, went to your Visa, MasterCard discounts? How much was bank interest and charges, long-term debt? How much cash over, bad debts, vendor? So we see the total for this shop was $7,084. Oops. Went to financial expense. Or 7.02%. Administrative expenses, again, by category. Owner salary, management salary, bookkeeping, accounting, service advisor, office admin, shop support staff, if you have that. Wage burden, EI, CPP, workers' comp, holiday pay in the U.S., SUTA and FUTA. Employee benefits, office expense. Sorry, I got to be hitting the right button here. The total administrative expense for this shop in the month of January is $14,000 or 14.53%. So if you're in a management group and somebody's significantly lower, you find out how they lowered it. If yours is higher and you go, how come mine's so high? And then we can analyze it as a group together. I love this part for marketing. How much did you spend advertising to bring new clients in the door? How much did you spend in your database marketing? How much did you spend bringing people that have never been there before? How much are you spending to bring people back who are already in your database? Now you can see the shop was spending very little, and they started to spend more, which is a good thing. Not that you want to spend too much, but we can see for the total marketing expense for the total category was 3.65%, 3.62. We see that he's spending between 3 and 5% a month on marketing. Our goal is 5%. So in January, he was actually lower than the goal. We actually taught him how to spend money on marketing to bring in more cars. And then, of course, you see the results of that. And then the last part of this is the net profit. And we can see that he made $19,000, or you'll see your net profit. But my favorite thing about this part of this is it accumulates on the bottom. So January, you made $19,000. February, year-to-date, you made $30,000. Next, you made $53,000. So you're seeing year-to-date profit. You don't see that on an income statement every month, but here you get a chance to see it. Now, I'm not going to get into this because this is really complex, but once we teach all of that and you see every month individually, we teach you how to forecast. And you forecast each month. It sounds like a lot of work, and initially it is, but you do it once a year, and you forecast, where should I be, where could I be, where could I be here? And then every single month, you see your variance. Where am I? What was my forecast? What was my variance? Did I hit my targets? And which ones did I hit? Which ones didn't I? And then when you get into other months of the year, it's even more complicated. Where was I? What was my forecast? What was my variance for the month of April in this case? But year to date, where am I? What was my forecast and variance? And the reason that's important is because you might have a bad month and you get discouraged and think, we weren't on target. But you look at your year to date and say, actually, we're up here, we're up here, we're down here, but we're up here, we're up here. So 1 month at a time is not, it's not micromanagement for sure. You need to see it. But just looking at every single month is oftentimes not enough. Lastly, I just want to quickly show you what is involved in a group. And with that, we're going to be done. Again, this is being recorded. I'm going to send this information to you. In our management group, and we're launching one for GEMINAR, we've done a few webinars similar to this in the past. The team membership group benefits, how you benefit by being a group member. We have a bi-weekly owner-manager online meeting. So that means that twice a month, you will be on a meeting like this, usually during the day. We like to do them during the day. The coaching sessions initially are usually at night. And when people get more and more and more stuff in place, they go, oh, I can spend an hour or 2 hours a week actually away from the shop. Usually you want to do the webinars away from the shop, but usually it's done in your office. And if you have to do something, you can go deal with it and come back to the live call because they are recorded. But every single month, twice a month, you are having a meeting online with everybody else in the group. 1 month, or sorry, I apologize. One of those meetings is just to review the composite, because the composite that I just showed you was showing month after month after month. But in our management groups, what we're looking at is everybody's composite together. And I'll show you, that's not, I don't want to get into it, but instead of saying January, February, March, April, May on the top, what you are seeing, what you're seeing is your shop, the next shop, the next shop, the next shop. So you see that your GP on parts is higher than everybody, so you help people learn how to learn what you did to get your parts gross profit up. But you've got somebody in the group who has 3 hours per repair order. You go, how do you do that? And they teach you what they did to get there. And then you've got somebody else whose labor to parts ratio is the highest in the group. They're at $1.35 in labor for every dollar in parts, and that's where you really should be. They teach you how to get there. Everybody's helping each other. And what I've learned in groups is everybody is king or queen of something. There's something you do better than everybody else. And so when it comes to this part in the meeting, the people that are doing the best in specific areas, nobody's doing brilliant in every area. That doesn't happen. But the people that are doing best are helping, and we're helping each other. I'll help you with this, you help me with this. And each month we see our numbers, and we hopefully see those numbers increase. Each month there's the meeting with the online members. Like I mentioned, we're reviewing the composite, and we also have a meeting for training. Secondly is a monthly one-on-one coaching. One of the things that did not happen with the WorldPAC groups or the groups that I ran in Canada was one-on-one with your coach. That doesn't happen in any group that I know, and I felt like it's helpful. I do one-on-one coaching, and I see the benefit. We talk about the nitty-gritty at your shop, and we deal with some really interesting issues like, what do you do when you've got an ADD employee? What do you do when you've got an alcoholic employee? What do you do when you've got somebody who's really lazy? What do you do when you've got somebody who won't take a shower and they smell up the whole base? And those are things you don't want to talk about in a group usually. So I do some one-on-one coaching, and usually they're about HR problems or employee problems or those kinds of things. The coaching sessions is one-on-one. You do it once a month with me and or Kevin. Sometimes we do them together. Kevin's brilliant. He's coming up to snuff on my material. I'm coming up to snuff on GEMCAR. We're working together as a team. There's nobody I'd rather do this with Kevin. He's just absolutely phenomenal. So you're going to be doing monthly one-on-one coaching. Thirdly is you have access to all of the current online sessions that I have. Online, we have 12 recorded sessions. I won't get into all the details. I'm going to send you a list of them along with the materials from this class. But we've got the one I'm sending you, Selling Diagnostic Labor. We've got one on pre-booking appointments, one on improving scheduling, one on selling skills, because a lot of advisors are not up to snuff on how to do selling. We've got one on how to improve communication, how many problems are causing your shop because of a lack of communication between the customer, the advisor, the tech, the advisor, and the customer. We've got ones on financial management, ones on marketing. So and we develop them all the time. These were all recorded live, and they were recorded. And so when you join the group, you automatically get access to all 12. We send you the links. We send you all the material. We suggest that you put them in individual files. And the nice thing about that is if you have somebody who quits or moves on or you fire them or whatever, you think, oh, I trained them all. Well, those webinars are still there, and you save them to your hard drive. And so you've got 3 advisors. Well, each can take their turn watching. Maybe you've got 2 shops and you want to share them between the 2 shops. That's fine. You bring in a new employee and you think, oh, they need to learn scheduling. They can watch the webinar. They need to learn how to sell diagnostics. They can watch the webinar. So you have access to these, but they're on your hard drive that you can watch over and over again. Some people will say, you know what, I love that one on workflow, that 10-minute section of that. We're going to do that at our next staff meeting. Or you covered increasing productivity. My techs need to see that from somebody besides me. Employees don't always listen to you because you're their boss, but they'll listen to somebody from the outside, especially if they're other employees, and they'll listen to that. And you say, let's watch how to increase productivity as a team. And next week in our staff meeting, we're going to watch 15 minutes on improving efficiency, or we're going to watch a 50-minute video, or whatever it is. So you can bite-size those webinars for staff meetings. Number 4 is the comprehensive financial analysis tool, the tool that I just showed you. That tool doesn't come with tonight's session. That's specifically for groups. It wouldn't be fair for me to share that to somebody who's not a group member. It's specifically for groups. Number 5, you get the monthly full group composite. So now you see your shop beside each of the other shops. For every single line of data you see for your own shop month to month, you're seeing where are you compared to Lisa, where are you compared to Vito, where are you compared to Carol and everybody else. And it's brilliant to be able to share information from one shop to another. Tool spreadsheets and forms. There are dozens and dozens of spreadsheets that I send to you as a group member. We have an annual live summit. We saw that recently with the GEMCAR group in Montreal. And what we're planning to do is to do a once a year summit where people come to the meeting live from wherever you are. That's the way we used to do it. Again, you don't want to do it every month. For WorldPAC, by the way, I ran a group in Seattle. I ran one in Northern California, one in Nevada, one in Denver. And what we would do is once a year, we would all gather together, anybody who wanted to travel. The meeting would be at the headquarters in California for WorldPAC, and we get to meet people that you saw in the composite from another group. And so that's what we're going to be doing once a year. I suspect for the GEMCAR group, it will be in conjunction with the GEMCAR convention that was just ran in Montreal. I spoke at that one and the one in Toronto as well. There's also an online group for sharing. It's kind of like Facebook in a sense, but it's just for the group. And so Carol says, I just saw this new inspection form that's awesome. She uploads it to the site. Everybody gets a message that says Carol uploaded an inspection. Somebody else says, I've got this brand new form I put together for tracking comebacks. I want to share that with everybody. And somebody else says, I did this new letter to my customers and it increased my visits. Or I put together this marketing program. And so up in this cloud, like Facebook, we have all these tools. So you can go, oh, what was Carol's form again? You go online and you can download any form that's been put on there by anybody. And just so you know, what I do is, so if I've got another group member that gives something to that group, I transfer that to our group online, so we're actually sharing between groups. So you're not just getting information from people in your own group, you're getting information from people in all the other groups as well. And lastly, and I think one of the most important, is once a month, it's your advisor that's on the call. Once a month, we have a meeting specifically for advisors. In management groups, I've never seen one that focused on the advisor. And yet your advisor maintains gross profit, hours per repair order, car count, labor to parts ratio, and yet they don't get involved in these meetings. So once a month, your advisor will get a composite, not the full composite we just showed you. That's from management. Your advisor doesn't need to see what your salary is or what the technicians get paid. They don't need to see what you pay for rent, but they need to see the top portion. So Kevin and I, just so you know what we did, we took our own composite and we share 60 lines of that. So the advisors only get to see the top portion of the statement. Now it's where your advisor is online and your advisor has the highest hours per repair order, and they're helping other advisors across the country or some in the US how to do that. You've got another advisor that has the highest effective labor rate. So just like every shop owner is king or queen of something, or some things, every advisor is king or queen of something. And now we have the advisors working together, and they see the composite every month, and they see, oh, I'm on the top this month for hours per repair order. I'm on the top this month. So they become competitive one to another, and I want to prove that I'm better at pre-booking appointments than that person that's in Montreal. And so I'm going to work harder at it. And you see these people working together as a team, and it's an amazing thing. So once a month is the group meeting with all the shop owners and managers, and once a month is a meeting just for your advisors. Now, if you are the advisor at your shop, of course you're going to be on that call as well, but most shops have a separate advisor. I don't want to get into all the detail of this. There's all the other benefits of that. Just to let you know, most people are going to want to know what the charges for that. Just so you know what we do, and I just wanted to put a picture of Kevin up there. Again, I've been working with Kevin for 2 years. I tell you, I get off the phone with Kevin and I'm pumped and motivated. He drove me to the airport the other day in Montreal, and I can't spend enough time with this guy. He feeds off me, I feed off him. We bounce ideas off each other, and he's just absolutely brilliant. Anyway, so what we've done is it's $330 to set up for the group. And what that means, as soon as you sign up, you immediately get your composite that you can start working on, and you get the coaching whenever you want it. If you want coaching next week, this week, and again, just so you know, the coaching should happen during the day, but almost everybody wants it at night, and that's fine. We understand that because you're busy. So most of the coaching, the shop that I just mentioned had his best month ever. He's a one-man shop. He's one tech. He's got an advisor, and he just doesn't want to get away from the shop during the day. That's fine. I do his coaching in the evening. Most of the coaching is during the evening. So this is one-on-one coaching. So for the first month, it's not the whole group together. It's you and me. It's you and Kevin. It's you and me and Kevin, or Kevin and I should say. And we bring you up to snuff on the composite. So when you join the group, you don't feel silly that you don't know how to fill in your numbers, or you don't know what the numbers mean. So you sign up. I'm going to send you a link. You can register. $330 gets you. And by the way, just so you know, I'm not trying to be the cheapest group in town. That's not what I'm saying. Groups are typically a lot more, but it's because a group has to pay for a hotel and pay for food, and the instructor has to fly there and pay for a hotel. Traveling is extremely expensive. An event like GEMINAR just put on, the breakfast food was amazing. The lunch was incredible. Carol, those desserts were awesome, weren't they? it costs a lot of money. And so we can offer a lower rate because the traveling is not involved for the instructors, for Kevin, myself, and for you as well. So just to be clear, because we'll keep running out of time, $330, you instantly get all of the webinars. I send you a link to all 12 webinars individually. So you get a link that says this is the selling workshop for service advisors. Here's the link. Here are the materials. Create a file for that. Download the materials. Download the webinar. I show you how to do it on your hard drive. You can watch it whenever you want. Then you get another link that says here is what we call the Service Advisors Essential webinar. And again, all the handouts that go along with that and the link. So you immediately get access to 12 webinars. And just for the record, that's about a $1,400 value just in that alone. And you get all the spreadsheets that I was talking about as well. We're starting the group this month, coaching one-on-one, like I just mentioned. By the end of next month, the plan is to have all of the group together on one call. Everybody's in the composite. I know that sounds rushed, but it's not. With one-on-one coaching, I've learned that we can bring people up to snuff really quickly with the composite because we're helping you with it. If you want your bookkeeper involved, we can talk to the bookkeeper. The bookkeeper can watch the webinar on how to fill in the composite, etc. So you've been very patient. Thank you very much. Again, I apologize for the little glitches there. After the session, I'm sending you a link. Now it takes a few hours to download the session and then upload it to YouTube and then send it to you. So that link you won't be getting this evening, obviously, but you will get it tomorrow. You're going to get the material that went along with this. I'm going to send you the income statement analysis tool. Please start doing that right away. It's really easy to do. I suggest you do the first month. And then what I'm going to encourage you to do when you feel comfortable with that tool is go back and do January's and February's and March's and April. And you know, it's not like the composite where you see it all side by side or side by each, as the French say. But you can, spread them out and look at them that way. But you can see month after month where your shop is going. I know people from 4 years ago who took training, and every single month they do their ISAT, they do their ISAT, they do their ISAT. It's the habit that they do. It's the minimum you should do, but it's something that you should be doing every month. I'm going to send you both of the matrices that I sent you, and I'm going to send you the link to the Selling Diagnostic Labor, like I mentioned. I'm going to send you this PowerPoint that went along with this and the link to sign up for the group. So with that, I apologize. I went really over. We started about 15 minutes late, but I went over beyond what I wanted to. Thanks for dealing with my voice. Now, I am going to open up this to questions. It doesn't mean we're done right now. But for those of you that need to go, and you know what, I'm looking down. We still have everybody who started. So to have that much patience to be on this late, for those of you on the East Coast, I commend you for taking the time to learn how to better run your business. To me, it's like a teacher who goes to the teachers convention or takes a professional development day to get away from doing what you do to learning how to do it better. The old adage, I'm sure you've all heard it, that we shouldn't just work in our business, we need to work on it. Well, when you're at your business every day, and you're dealing with 232 interruptions, and the employer wants to talk to you, and the vendor wants to talk to you, and your gem car guy wants to talk to you, and your part guy wants to talk to you, and then somebody's got to come back, and a customer wants to talk to you, and you've got an email, and you've got to do this quote, and this estimate, and there's no part, you got to go get the part yourself, and at the end of the day, you're exhausted, and you think, what really got done today? Well, it's nice to stop. I do the same thing. I have professional development days. I have a leadership summit that I attend. I watch TED Talks all the time. I learn and I learn. And you know what? How much do we not know? Think about what we don't know. We don't know. We only know a fraction of what there is to know out there. And personally, I'm a learner. I love to learn every single day. I want to learn something. What do I know today that I didn't know yesterday about a variety of topics, sometimes leadership, sometimes management, sometimes politics, sometimes religion, or whatever it is. I want to learn and learn and learn. I want to encourage you to do the exact same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to risk unmuting. And I say risk only because it can be noisy. But for those of you that do need to go, it makes sense that you would be. Thank you very much. Again, you'll expect an email from me. You're going to get all of this. For those of you that were not watching this live, thank you very much for your patience going through this. Of course, you had a chance to pause it. The people on the live session didn't. But again, you can go back, pause it, rewind with the link that I'm sending you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up to questions. You are very welcome, Lisa. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for your So I have unmuted everybody. So if you would like to, you have a choice. You can chat and put in any questions you have there. You can ask them and everybody will hear you. Or you can email them to me after the session and I will answer every single email that I get. Carol says, thank you very much. Can't wait to start working with you. Carol, you're a gem, an absolute gem of a, not just because you were at the GEMCAR meeting, but you're a gem. I loved our conversation afterwards, and the email that you sent me was very much appreciated. Now, some of your head's probably swimming because that's a lot of information in a short period of time. Carol says that's life. You know, when I first started doing webinars, because I've been training for 30 years, I thought, well, I get excited doing webinars. And I mean, I'm sitting in an office right now with a computer in front of me and a microphone. And I tell you one thing I do know is it's helpful for me to know some of the people that are on the call. Like Carol, I can vision you in the class. Vito, same thing. And so when I can vision that, then I can kind of see you listening to it. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. So I get very excited. And coaching, you know, honestly, one-on-one coaching online, looking at people's financials, looking at the information on the, you know, the composite and entering that data, you would think it would be boring. I get so excited. After I'm finished a webinar, I'm not exhausted. I'm just pumped. I think, look at who just, I got to tell you, this one guy who's in the group, he's in Atlanta, Canada. His name of his shop is, I mentioned it in Laval, is called the Old Volkshome, and that's all he works on is Volkswagens. He took training from me, a 3-hour session, a couple of years ago. His labor rate was 82. After the session, it went up to 87. It was a bit challenging because he wasn't sure if that would work. And he said nobody even questioned it. So we were looking at his effective labor rate. For the record, was only $47 an hour. Even though his labor rate was 87, he still wasn't collecting the full 87. And through some coaching and encouraging him, he said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go up to 100. About 3 weeks later, he sends me an email and says, guess what? I'm at 100. Nobody's even mentioned it. Nobody's asked. Nobody's mentioned it. They haven't even noticed. He said, why did I doubt you? I said, you didn't doubt me. You doubted yourself. You know, as a trainer, I don't motivate people. I encourage people. I inspire people. And I find when somebody inspires you, you motivate yourself. But we don't motivate each other. I don't believe we can motivate our employees. I believe we can inspire our employees. Somebody said, I want to send my employees to your class so you can light a firecracker or a fire under their butt. And I said, that's not my job. My job is to light a fire within. Because if I inspire them, they want to go back and do better just because they want to do better. That's inspiration versus motivation. Thank you, Lisa. So as far as the group goes, I really, really want to encourage you. Again, I don't exaggerate. The shops that I know that do the absolute best, and I don't just mean the ones in BC. You know, I'm still in touch with people that are in the group in Seattle and people that are in the group in Denver. And I'm excited that each of the groups that I started with WorldPAC 5 years ago are still running to this day. And I just turned it over to somebody else. And I think if you're a good leader, if you walk away or move on, somebody replaces you and it continues, then you did your job. I saw this quote the other day and I loved it, and I put it on my Facebook. It said, leaders don't create followers, leaders create more leaders. And I thought, I like that, because it's not about having a following, it's leaders create more leaders. And so it's the same thing with your business. If you run it really well, you can go away for a 2-week vacation and it runs while you're gone. You sell the business to somebody else and they continue on and make it continually to be successful. You did it right because you built the business. But some people think if they walk away from the business for a week, it would fall apart. Well, that shouldn't be. I could go on for hours and hours. As you know, the people in Laval, I talk a lot. But there's so much to learn, so much to share. I learn all the time. Okay, well, with that, again, if you have any questions, Kelly at kellythecoach.com. Love to answer your questions. I get back to emails usually very, very quickly. Again, I'm going to send you all the files. If perchance by tomorrow you do not have the information from you, something went wrong. It may have gone into spam. By the way, the reason I send the emails individually and not every single file attached is because it's way too much for one email, and your email provider may not allow that size of an email. So if I send you 12 webinars, you're going to get 12 links, 12 emails, I should say, with 12 separate links with the emails that have the attachments for each of the links that's attached. So when you join the group, you're going to get 12 emails that are just the webinars. And again, each link is attached to the webinar, or sorry, the email, I should say, with all the materials. So what you should do is create a file. You see the email come in. Oh, that's Selling Diagnostics. Create a file folder, put all the material into there, including the link. Then you see the one on filling in the ISAT. Same thing, create a file folder so that you can keep them all separate. You don't want all of those workbooks for 12 different webinars all over your hard drive. With that, everybody, thank you very much. Again, I apologize for the voice thing going on. Not having Kevin on made it a little bit more challenging with the PowerPoint, but the benefit for you is getting that selling diagnostic labor. Seriously, that selling diagnostic labor, if you implement what's covered in that 90 minutes, it's going to revolutionize your business. I mean, I don't exaggerate that. It's going to make a massive difference. We're not talking hundreds of dollars a month. We're talking thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in selling diagnostics and the parts gross profit and all the things that go along with that. With that, again, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate everybody staying on for the entire time. That's pretty commendable. With that, I hate ending this, but thank you very much. Go back, kick butt, make a lot more money, and have a lot more fun. And probably even more important is reduce your stress, because I see the amount of stress that people go through, like that shop I was at that was so busy, and I just almost had a headache watching what was going on. But they put in the work order act flow system, by the way. I installed it for them, actually, because they were too busy. And the advisor sent me an email and said, oh my God, is this ever smooth? It's so much more efficient finding keys in the work order act flow system, which, by the way, is part of one of the webinars, as well as how to put in a 5-rack work order act flow system that makes that whole process a whole lot simpler, reduces your stress. With that, everybody, I can go on, but I won't. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And look forward to communicating with you in the future. Good night.